Told myself I wasn't the kind of person who believed in ghosts or monsters. Hello, welcome to the channel. My name is Studio. Tonight marks our very first live stream of true horror storytelling. If you're here to relax, unwind, and maybe even fall asleep to some truly terrifying stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If this live stream reaches 100 likes, we'll make this a weekly experience. So now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and lay down. Let's begin. There are jobs that pay well because they're dangerous. And then there are jobs that pay well because nobody else will take them. Jobs where the turnover is so high that employers stop asking questions and just hand you a uniform and a flashlight. Jobs where the last 3 guys quit without giving notice. Jobs where something is very, very wrong, but nobody wants to admit it. My name is Carlos. I'm 34 years old, and for 3 months in 2023, I worked as a night security guard at a warehouse in the industrial district of a mid-sized city I'm not going to name. The pay was almost twice what other security jobs offered. The work was simple. Walk the property, check the doors, make sure nobody breaks in. I should have known something was wrong when they hired me on the spot. No background check, no drug test, no references. Just, can you start tonight? And a contract to sign. I should have walked away when the day shift guard had that look in his eyes, that 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen something they couldn't explain. I should have quit after the first week when the scratching started. But I needed the money. And I told myself I wasn't the kind of person who believed in ghosts or monsters or things that go bump in the night. I was wrong about a lot of things. The warehouse was a massive structure, about 100,000 square feet of concrete floors, metal shelving units, and fluorescent lights that flickered more than they should. It had been built in the 1960s, used for various purposes over the decades, and was currently leased to a logistics company that stored inventory for online retailers. During the day, the place was bustling with workers, forklifts, delivery trucks. But at 10 p.m., everyone left. The place was locked up, and that's when I came on shift. Me alone in a building the size of 2 football fields until 6 a.m. My first night, the day shift supervisor, a tired-looking guy named Tom, gave me the basic rundown. You do a patrol every hour. Check all the doors. There are 12 external doors. All should be locked from the inside. Check the loading docks. Make sure the bay doors are secure. And he paused, looking uncomfortable. And stay out of the northwest section. Why? What's in the northwest section? Nothing. That's the problem. Hello, and welcome to the channel. My name is Studio. Tonight marks our very first live stream of true horror storytelling. If you're here to relax, unwind, and maybe even fall asleep to some truly terrifying stories, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If this live stream reaches 100 likes, we'll make this a weekly experience. So now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and lay down. Let's begin. There are jobs that pay well because they're dangerous. And then there are jobs that pay well because nobody else will take them. Jobs where the turnover is so high that employers stop asking questions and just hand you a uniform and a flashlight. Jobs where the last 3 guys quit without giving notice. Jobs where something is very, very wrong, but nobody wants to admit it. My name is Carlos. I'm 34 years old, and for 3 months in 2023, I worked as a night security guard at a warehouse in the industrial district of a mid-sized city I'm not going to name. The pay was almost twice what other security jobs offered. The work was simple. Walk the property, check the doors, make sure nobody breaks in. I should have known something was wrong when they hired me on the spot. No background check, no drug test, no references. Just, can you start tonight? And a contract to sign. I should have walked away when the day shift guard had that look in his eyes, that 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen something they couldn't explain. I should have quit after the first week when the scratching started. But I needed the money. And I told myself I wasn't the kind of person who believed in ghosts or monsters or things that go bump in the night. I was wrong about a lot of things. The warehouse was a massive structure, about 100,000 square feet of concrete floors, metal shelving units, and fluorescent lights that flickered more than they should. It had been built in the 1960s, used for various purposes over the decades, and was currently leased to a logistics company that stored inventory for online retailers. During the day, the place was bustling with workers, forklifts, delivery trucks. But at 10 p.m., everyone left. The place was locked up, and that's when I came on shift. Me alone in a building the size of 2 football fields until 6 a.m. My first night, the day shift supervisor, a tired-looking guy named Tom, gave me the basic rundown. You do a patrol every hour. Check all the doors. There are 12 external doors. All should be locked from the inside. Check the loading docks. Make sure the bay doors are secure. And he paused, looking uncomfortable. And stay out of the northwest section. Why? What's in the northwest section? Nothing. That's the problem. That area's been empty for about 6 months. No inventory stored there. Just empty shelves. But the lights don't work right. The temperature is weird, and it's just better if you stay out of there. What do you mean the temperature is weird? It's always cold. Like 30 degrees colder than the rest of the warehouse. Maintenance has checked it a dozen times. Can't find any reason for it. Ventilation is normal, no drafts, but that whole section is like a walk-in freezer. Has anything happened there? Accidents or... Tom cut me off. Look, just stay out of there unless you absolutely have to check it. Do your patrols in the other sections, log your rounds, and you'll be fine. The last few guards, they didn't follow instructions. They got curious. And they didn't last long. They quit. All of them. Usually after a week or 2, said the job wasn't for them. He looked at me seriously. This is an easy gig if you just follow the rules. Don't go looking for trouble, and trouble won't find you. That should have been my first clue. But like I said, I needed the money. My first week was uneventful. I'd show up at 10 p.m. Tom would leave, and I'd be alone. I'd do my hourly patrols, walking through the aisles with my flashlight, checking doors, making notes on my log sheet. The warehouse at night was eerie, but not frightening. just big and empty and filled with the ambient hum of HVAC systems and the occasional creak of metal settling. I avoided the northwest section like Tom had instructed. I could see it from a distance. A large area of empty shelving units, poorly lit, with those flickering fluorescents that made everything look sickly and wrong. And yes, you could feel the temperature drop as you got closer, like approaching a wall of cold air. But I didn't investigate. I stayed in the well-lit sections, did my patrols, and collected my paycheck. Then came my 8th night. I was doing my 2 a.m. patrol, walking down one of the main aisles, when I heard it. A sound from the northwest section, like something metal being dragged across concrete. Slow and deliberate. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. Pause. I stopped walking and listened. The sound continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped. Complete silence. I waited. Nothing. Just the normal warehouse sounds. Ventilation, the hum of electronics, the occasional ping of metal cooling. I convinced myself it was probably nothing. Buildings make noises, especially old ones. Metal expands and contracts. Shelving units settle. It was probably just that. But the next night, it happened again. Same time. Around 2 a.m. Same sound. That slow, dragging scrape coming from the northwest section. Scray, ape, pause. Scray, ape, pause. This time I walked closer, getting to the edge where the northwest section began. The temperature dropped immediately. I could see my breath fogging in the air. The lights in that section were barely functioning, most of them dark or strobing intermittently. "Hello?" I called out. "This is security. If someone's in here, you need to identify yourself." The dragging sound stopped. Silence. Then, after about 10 seconds, I heard something else. Footsteps. Fast footsteps, like someone running. But they were moving away from me, deeper into the northwest section. I radioed the supervisor's emergency line. Tom answered, sounding groggy. "There's someone in the building," I said. "Northwest section. I heard movement. Did you see anyone?" "No, just heard them." "Should I investigate?" There was a long pause. "No. Lock yourself in the security office. I'll be there in 20 minutes. But if there's an intruder..." "Just do what I said, Carlos. Lock yourself in the office and wait for me." He hung up. I stood there at the edge of the northwest section, listening. The footsteps had stopped. Everything was quiet again. I should have gone to the office like he said. But I'm stubborn, and I'd been doing security long enough to not be scared of trespassers. I turned on my flashlight and walked into the northwest section. The cold hit me like a physical wall. It wasn't just cool, it was freezing. My breath came out in thick clouds. I could feel the cold seeping through my uniform, making my skin prickle. The shelving units in this section were completely empty. Just metal frames stretching up 20 feet high, creating corridors of empty space. The few lights that were working created strange shadows, and the ones that were flickering made everything seem to move, even when it wasn't. I walked slowly down the main aisle, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Security! If you're in here, you need to come out now." No response. Just the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the empty space. I was about halfway through the section when I saw it. On the floor, in the beam of my flashlight. Scratch marks. Deep gouges in the concrete, like something heavy and metal had been dragged across it. They formed a line leading from where I was standing deeper into the section. I followed them. The scratches continued for about 50 feet, then stopped at one of the shelving units. At the base of the unit, I saw more marks. These ones looked almost deliberate. Not random scratches, but patterns. Symbols, maybe, or letters that I couldn't quite make out. That's when I heard the breathing. It was coming from above me, up in the shelving unit. Heavy, wet breathing, like someone with a chest cold. I stepped back and pointed my flashlight upward. The beam swept across the metal shelves. 3rd level, 4th level, 5th level, all empty, nothing there. But the breathing continued. And it was getting louder. I turned and walked quickly back toward the main warehouse. Not running, but moving with purpose. The breathing followed me, staying just behind, just above, like something was moving through the shelving units parallel to my path. I exited the northwest section and kept walking until I was back in the well-lit central area. The breathing stopped. The temperature normalized. I stood there catching my own breath, my heart pounding. Tom arrived about 15 minutes later. He found me in the security office, watching the camera feeds. I'd been checking the cameras for the northwest section, but there were only 2 cameras covering that area, and they were both showing just empty shelving units. "Did you go in there?" he asked. He already knew the answer from my expression. "Yeah, I heard something. I thought there was an intruder." And scratch marks on the floor, and breathing. I heard breathing. Tom sat down heavily. "Jesus." "Okay. Listen to me carefully, Carlos. What you heard, it's not an intruder. At least, not a human one." "What does that mean?" He rubbed his face. "You know how I said the last few guards quit? They all did the same thing you did. Got curious. Went into the northwest section to investigate. And they all experienced things, sounds, cold spots, feelings of being watched or followed. One guy said he saw someone, a figure in the shadows that moved wrong, like its joints bent in ways they shouldn't. You're saying the place is haunted. I'm saying something is wrong with that section. Has been for about 2 years since." "Huh." He paused. "Since the accident." "What accident?" "There was a guy who worked here, forklift operator named Dennis Crawford. Good worker. Been here for years. One night, he was working late, moving some inventory in the northwest section. Something went wrong. Forklift tipped. Shelving unit came down on top of him. Crushed him. He died before the ambulance arrived. I felt cold, despite being in the warm section of the warehouse. When did this happen? About 2 years ago, October 15th, 2021. After that, workers started reporting weird things in that section. Cold spots. Sounds, equipment malfunctioning. So the company stopped storing anything there. It's been empty ever since." "And you didn't think to mention this before I started? Would you have taken the job if I had?" "Fair point. The rule is simple," Tom continued. "Stay out of the northwest section. Don't investigate sounds. Don't go looking for explanations. Just do your patrols in the other areas and leave that section alone. Can you do that?" I wanted to quit right then. But the money was good, and rationally, I knew that buildings make sounds. Accidents happen. And just because one guy died here doesn't mean the place is haunted. "Yeah," I said. "I can do that. But I couldn't. Over the next 2 weeks, the sounds got worse. Every night around 2 a.m., I'd hear the dragging sound from the northwest section. Sometimes it would be accompanied by other noises. The crash of metal falling, footsteps running, the whir of a forklift engine, even though all the forklifts were parked and locked in the garage. And the breathing. I'd hear it even when I was in other parts of the warehouse. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone struggling under a weight. I started dreading 2 a.m. I'd watch the clock counting down, knowing that when it hit 200, the sounds would start. Like clockwork. Like whatever was in that northwest section was following a schedule. Replaying something over and over. On my 16th night, something changed. I was in the security office at 1055 a.m., watching the camera feeds, when one of the cameras in the northwest section flickered. The image distorted, showing static, then came back. But when it cleared, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There was someone on the screen. A man wearing a company uniform operating a forklift. He was moving through the aisles, the forklift's forks loaded with a pallet of boxes. But here's the thing, there was no one in the building. The warehouse was locked. All the forklifts were in the garage. And this footage wasn't recorded. It was the live feed. I watched as the figure on screen maneuvered the forklift around a corner. I could see it clearly now. It was slightly translucent, like watching a projection or a hologram. The forklift moved wrong too, jittery, like footage with dropped frames. Then the shelving unit collapsed. On the camera, I watched as one of the metal shelving units tilted, swayed, and came crashing down on top of the forklift and the operator. The image distorted again with static, and when it cleared, the scene was back to normal empty shelves, no forklift, no person. But I could hear it now, even from the office. The crash of metal, the sound of something heavy falling. And then, faintly, a sound that made every hair on my body stand up. Someone screaming. It only lasted a few seconds. Then, silence. I sat there frozen, staring at the camera feed. My hands were shaking. I checked the timestamp on the recording. 2000 a.m. Exactly. I pulled out my phone and Googled Dennis Crawford forklift accident. Found an old article from the local news. The accident had occurred on October 15, 2021, at approximately 2000 a.m. Dennis Crawford, age 43, crushed when a shelving unit collapsed on his forklift, died at the scene. And every night since, at the exact time of his death, it was happening again. He was replaying his final moments over and over, trapped in some kind of loop. I should have quit that night, should have walked out and never looked back. But something compelled me to understand what was happening. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the need to prove to myself that there was a rational explanation. Or maybe something wanted me to investigate, wanted me to go deeper. The next night, at 50 a.m., I was standing at the edge of the northwest section with my flashlight and my phone set to record. I wanted to capture proof of what was happening, wanted to see if the phenomenon would repeat. At exactly 200 a.m., it started. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. And then I heard the forklift. The distinctive whir of the electric motor, the beep of it backing up. I pointed my phone toward the sound and started recording. At first, there was nothing visible, just empty aisles and dark shelving units. But then the air began to shimmer like heat waves, and I saw him. Dennis Crawford. or a version of him. He was translucent, ghostly, but clearly visible in the dim light. He was operating a forklift that was equally translucent, moving down the aisle with a loaded pallet. He didn't look at me, didn't seem aware I was there. He was focused on his work, maneuvering the forklift with practiced ease. I could hear him humming a tune I didn't recognize. Then I saw the shelving unit start to sway. It happened in slow motion. The shelving unit tilted, pulling away from its moorings. Dennis looked up, his expression changing from concentration to shock to terror. He tried to reverse the forklift, but it was too late. The massive metal structure came down on top of him. The crash was deafening. I could feel it through the floor, even though I knew, intellectually, that this wasn't really happening. This was a recording, a psychic imprint, a ghost of a moment playing out again. But it felt real. And the scream, Dennis's scream as he was crushed, was the most horrible sound I'd ever heard. Then it was over. The ghostly images faded. The shelving unit was back in its normal position, no longer collapsed. The forklift was gone, and Dennis was gone. But I could still hear him. Faint, distant, like an echo. He was moaning in pain, calling for help. "Hello? Someone help me! Please, it hurts! God, it hurts so much!" The voice was coming from deeper in the northwest section, from the exact spot where he died. I don't know what possessed me to do what I did next. Maybe it was compassion. Maybe it was stupidity. But I walked toward the voice. "Dennis?" I called out. "Dennis Crawford?" The moaning stopped. Silence for a few seconds. Then, "Who's there? Help me. Please help me. I'm trapped." I reached the spot where the shelving unit had collapsed in the ghostly replay. In the real world, there was nothing there, just empty floor and upright shelving. But the temperature was freezing, and I could feel something, a presence, a weight, a suffering that hung in the air like smoke. "Dennis, I'm a security guard. I know what happened to you. I know you died here. No, I'm not dead. I'm trapped. Under the shelves. I can't move. Please, you have to lift them off. You have to get me out." "Dennis, that happened 2 years ago. You're not alive anymore. No." The voice became a roar, and suddenly the temperature dropped even further. My phone's screen flickered and died. My flashlight began to strobe, and I felt something, a force, a wind, a presence, push against me. I stumbled backward and fell. When I scrambled to my feet, my flashlight was working normally again. But the voice was different now, angry. "You're lying. I'm not dead. I'm right here. I'm trapped. And everyone who comes here, everyone who hears me, they all say the same thing. You're dead. You're a ghost." But I'm not. I'm alive. I'm suffering. And no one will help me. The shelving units around me began to shake, not violently, but enough to make them rattle, to make the metal sing with vibration. "I'm sorry," I said, backing away. "I'm so sorry, Dennis, but I can't help you. You need to. You need to let go. You need to move on." "I can't." The voice was everywhere now, echoing through the section. "I'm trapped in this moment, in this pain. Every night, I die again." Every night, The shelf falls and crushes me, and I feel every second of it. And then I'm here, calling for help, and no one comes. No one ever comes. I ran. I'm not proud of it, but I ran. Out of the northwest section, through the warehouse, to the security office. I locked myself in and called Tom. "I saw him," I said when he answered. "Dennis. I saw what happened, and I heard him. He's trapped there, Tom. He's reliving his death every night, and he doesn't understand that he's dead." Tom was quiet for a long time. "Yeah, I know. That's what the other guards said too. That's why they quit. It's one thing to deal with a haunting. It's another thing to realize you can't help. That someone's in agony and there's nothing you can do about it. Why don't they get someone in to help? A priest or a medium or—" The company tried that. Brought in 3 different paranormal investigators. None of them could do anything. One said Dennis's death was so traumatic that it created a kind of scar on reality. That the moment keeps playing out because the violence of it was so intense. Another said that Dennis doesn't believe he's dead, and that belief is keeping him trapped. And the third refused to say anything at all. Just left and wouldn't take payment for his time. So what are we supposed to do? Just let him suffer? There's nothing we can do, Carlos. The company can't sell the building because of this, can't tear it down because of the bankruptcy proceedings, can't use that section for storage. All we can do is keep a guard on site, keep the building secure, and hope that someday Dennis either moves on or the building gets demolished. Whichever comes first. Chi. I worked there for 6 more weeks. Every night at 2 a.m., Dennis died again. Every night I heard him calling for help. And every night I had to resist the urge to go to him because I knew there was nothing I could do. The worst part was knowing that he was aware. That every night he experienced the full trauma of his death and then spent the hours until dawn trapped in that moment, calling for help that would never come. I started having nightmares. I'd dream that I was the one under the shelving unit, crushed and dying, calling for help while people walked by and ignored me. I'd wake up in a panic, sometimes still feeling the phantom weight on my chest. My girlfriend noticed I was changing. More withdrawn, more anxious. I couldn't tell her what was happening. She'd think I was insane. But she knew something was wrong. I quit in early December, gave 2 weeks' notice, worked my final shifts, and got out. The company didn't seem surprised. They'd already started advertising for a new night guard. I heard later that they went through 3 more guards before the building finally sold in mid-2024. The new owners are going to demolish it and build something new on the lot. I hope that helps Dennis. I hope that when the building comes down, whatever's keeping him trapped will be destroyed too, that he'll finally be able to move on. But I'm not sure it works that way. I'm not sure demolishing the building will release him. What if he's not tied to the building, but to the moment? What if he's trapped in that instant of death and he'll stay there forever, regardless of what happens to the physical space? I don't have answers. I just have memories. Memories of a man dying over and over again, trapped in his final moments, unable to accept or escape what happened to him. And sometimes, late at night, I still hear him. Even though I don't work there anymore. Even though I'm miles away in a different city. I hear that faint voice calling for help. Someone help me. Please, it hurts. God, it hurts so much. And I can't do anything but listen. This is a warning to anyone who works night security in old buildings, in places where accidents have happened. Sometimes the dead don't rest. Sometimes they replay their deaths over and over. And sometimes they're aware of it, trapped in a loop of pain and confusion that they can't escape. You can't help them. You can only witness their suffering. And that might be the worst part of all. I'll never work night security again. The money isn't worth it. No amount of money is worth hearing someone die every single night and knowing you're powerless to stop it. Dennis Crawford died on October 15, 2021 at 2:00 a.m. But in a way, he's still dying, still trapped under that shelving unit, still calling for help. And I'm afraid he always will be. Shopping malls are dying. Everyone knows that. With online shopping and changing consumer habits, these massive temples to consumerism that defined the 80s and 90s are becoming obsolete. All across America, malls are closing, becoming ghost towns of shuttered stores and empty food courts. But before they close completely, they die slowly. Stores close one by one. Foot traffic dwindles. The lights get dimmed to save money. Whole sections get cordoned off. And that's when things get weird, because empty spaces attract things. And dying places have their own kind of energy. A desperate, hungry energy. Like they know they're fading away, and they're trying to hold on to whatever life they can find. My name is Derek. I'm 31 years old, and I used to work as a night security guard at Westfield Commons Mall in suburban Ohio. I worked there for 9 months, from January to September 2023, before I quit. Before I walked out in the middle of my shift and swore I'd never set foot in that building again. This is the story of what I encountered on the 3rd floor of a dying mall, and why I'll never work night security again. Westfield Commons opened in 1987 during the height of the mall boom. 3 floors, over 200 stores, multiple anchor departments, a food court that could seat 500 people. In its heyday, the place was packed every weekend, especially during the holidays. It was the social hub for teenagers, the destination for back-to-school shopping, the place where people went to see and be seen. But by 2023, it was barely hanging on. The 3rd floor had been almost entirely vacant since 2019. Most of the major anchor stores had closed. The food court was down to 3 operating restaurants. On a busy Saturday, you might see a few dozen people scattered across 3 floors that were designed to hold thousands. The owners were in bankruptcy proceedings. Everyone knew the mall was circling the drain. But they kept it open, kept the lights on, kept paying a skeleton crew to maintain the illusion that this was still a functioning shopping center. That's where I came in. I'd been working private security for a few years, office buildings mostly, some residential complexes. The pay was shit, but the work was easy. When I saw an opening for night security at Westfield Commons, I applied. Night shift paid a little better. And how hard could it be to watch an empty mall? I started in early January. The training was minimal. Here's how to use the radios. Here's the patrol route. Here's how to handle medical emergencies or trespassers. I was one of 3 night guards who rotated shifts. The other 2 were Larry, a guy in his 60s who'd worked there for 15 years, and Michelle, a woman in her 40s who'd been there about 3 years. My first few nights were uneventful. I'd show up at 10 p.m. when the mall officially closed. I'd wait for the remaining employees and shoppers to leave, then lock the main entrances. Then it was just me, walking the empty corridors with my flashlight and radio, checking doors, watching for anything unusual. The mall at night was eerie but not frightening. Just empty. The stores were all gated and locked. The fountains were turned off. The music that played during the day was silenced. Just the hum of HVAC systems and the echo of my footsteps on tile floors. But there was something off about the third floor. I noticed it on my second night. I was doing my patrol route, which required me to check every floor, every corridor, every exit. When I reached the third floor via the west stairwell, I felt it immediately. A temperature drop. It was January, and the mall kept the heat low at night to save money. But this was different. The third floor was noticeably colder than the first two floors. Cold enough that I could see my breath. The third floor was also almost entirely dark. Most of the stores up there were vacant, their spaces empty behind the metal security gates. The few stores that remained were tucked in the corners. A nail salon, a phone repair shop, a store that sold knockoff designer purses. The main corridor was lit only by emergency lighting, casting long shadows. And it was quiet, even quieter than the lower floors. My footsteps seemed to echo differently up there, like the space was absorbing sound instead of reflecting it. I made my way down the corridor, checking each gated storefront, making notes on my patrol log. Everything was secure. Everything was empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It's a common sensation, especially when you're alone in a large space at night. Your mind plays tricks on you, makes you hyper-aware of every sound and shadow. I'd experienced it before in other buildings. You learn to ignore it. But this felt different, more present. Like there actually was someone there, just out of sight, tracking my movements. I finished the third floor patrol quickly and headed back downstairs. As I descended the stairwell, I felt the temperature normalize. The oppressive feeling lifted, and I breathed a little easier. Over the next few weeks, I settled into the routine. The job was boring but easy. Most nights, nothing happened. I'd do my patrols, check my phone, watch videos to pass the time. The worst incidents were usually teenagers who'd snuck in to skateboard or vandalize something, and they'd always run when they saw me coming. But the third floor continued to bother me. Every time I went up there, I felt that same cold, that same sensation of being watched. And sometimes I'd hear things, soft sounds like footsteps or distant voices that would stop the moment I turned toward them. I mentioned it to Larry, the senior guard, during a shift overlap. "Oh yeah, the third floor," he said, nodding knowingly. "That place has always been weird, especially since they started closing all the stores up there." "What do you mean, weird?" "Just off, colder than it should be. Sounds that don't make sense." I do my patrols up there as quickly as possible and get back downstairs. "You ever see anything? Like, actually see something?" Larry was quiet for a moment. "Once. About 5 years ago. I was doing a late patrol. Must have been 2 or 3 in the morning. I'm walking the main corridor on 3, and I see someone. A woman, standing in front of one of the vacant stores. Just standing there, facing the gate. A trespasser? That's what I thought. I called out to her, started walking toward her with my flashlight. But as I got closer, she didn't move, didn't turn around, just stood there. And then I thought maybe I'd seen a shadow or a reflection. But I went up to that gate and checked it. Locked solid. No way anyone could have gone through it. And when I shined my light into the store, there was nothing there. Just an empty space. Did you report it? Who would I report it to? The mall management? Hey, boss, I saw a ghost on the 3rd floor. I kept my mouth shut and stayed off that floor as much as I could after that. I wanted to dismiss it as an old man's imagination or a prank he was playing on the new guy, but I'd felt something up there too. And over the next few weeks, it got worse. In late February, I was doing a 2 a.m. patrol of the 3rd floor. I'd just turned into the east corridor when I heard it. Music. Faint, tinny, like it was coming from old speakers. It sounded like muzak, the kind of generic instrumental pop that malls play during business hours. But the mall music system was turned off at night. I knew because I'd checked the controls on my first day. After closing, the whole system shut down automatically. I followed the sound. Doors were vacant. As I walked, the music got slightly louder, and I could make out the melody. Some elevator music version of an 80s pop song. The music was coming from a store called Trends. According to my directory, Trends had been a clothing store that closed in 2018. The space had been empty for 5 years. I approached the security gate. It was pulled down and locked, as it should be. But through the gate, inside the darkened store, I could see light. A faint, flickering light, like a TV was on, and I could see movement, shadows moving across the walls inside the store. "This is security," I called out. "If someone's in there, you need to come out now. This is private property." The music stopped. The light went out. The shadows stopped moving. I stood there in the sudden silence, my heart pounding. I shined my flashlight through the gate, illuminating the store interior. Empty. Completely empty. No furniture, no fixtures, no source for the music or the light, just bare walls and a concrete floor. I checked the gate. Locked solid. I checked the store's back entrance from the service corridor. Also locked, with a padlock that was rusted shut. No one could have been in there. But I'd seen the light, heard the music, seen the shadows. I reported it to my supervisor the next morning. He listened, made some notes, and said he'd have maintenance check the store's electrical system. They found nothing. The store had been completely disconnected from the mall's power grid. There was no way music could have been playing, or lights could have been on. Maybe you saw a reflection, my supervisor suggested, or light from another store bleeding through somehow. But I knew what I'd seen, and I was starting to understand why the 3rd floor felt so wrong. It got worse in March. I was doing a patrol around 1 a.m. when I heard footsteps. Not the echo of my own footsteps, but different ones. Lighter, faster. Coming from the corridor ahead of me. I stopped and listened. The footsteps continued. It sounded like someone running. "Security!" I called out. "Stop where you are!" The footsteps got faster. I started jogging toward them, my flashlight beam sweeping back and forth. I turned a corner and saw her. A woman, maybe in her 30s, wearing what looked like a mall employee uniform from the 90s. Khaki pants, a polo shirt with a name tag. She was running away from me, heading toward the center court area where the escalators were located. "Ma'am, stop! I need to talk to you!" She didn't stop, didn't even look back. She just kept running, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. I chased after her, but she was fast. She reached the center court and ran toward the railing that overlooked the floors below. And then, without hesitating, she jumped over it. "No!" I sprinted to the railing and looked down, expecting to see her body on the floor below. But there was nothing. The second floor was empty. No one there. No body. No sign that anyone had fallen. I radioed for backup, checked all the stairwells, searched the entire mall. Nothing. She'd vanished. The next morning, I asked my supervisor if anyone had died at the mall, jumped or fallen from the third floor. He got a strange look on his face. "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. There was an incident. Long time ago. 1994, I think. A woman who worked at one of the stores on the third floor. She was having some kind of mental health crisis. During her shift one day, she just jumped from the third floor railing, right in the center court. Died on impact." "What was her name?" "I don't remember. It was before my time. But it's part of the mall's history. One of those tragic things that people don't like to talk about." I thought about the woman I'd seen. The 90s era uniform, the way she ran straight for the railing without hesitation. I'd seen her replay her death. I was sure of it. After that, I started dreading the third floor patrols. The cold, the sounds, the feeling of being watched. It was all intensifying. And I was seeing more things. Shadows that moved on their own. Reflections in store windows that didn't match reality. Doors that should be locked standing slightly ajar. In April, I started finding the mannequins. Some of the vacant stores still had mannequins left behind. Plastic figures that had once displayed clothes, now standing empty and discarded in dark storefronts. I'd noticed them during my first few patrols, thought nothing of them. But they were moving. I'm not talking about subtle shifts that could be explained by temperature changes or settling. I mean they were in completely different positions. I'd pass a store during my first patrol of the night and see a mannequin facing the back wall. 3 hours later, on my second patrol, it would be facing me. I started documenting it with photos. Every time I passed a store with mannequins, I'd take a picture. Then I'd take another picture on my next patrol. The differences were undeniable. They were moving. One night, I watched it happen in real time. I was standing in the corridor, staring at a vacant store that had 3 mannequins inside. As I watched, one of them slowly turned its head, not all at once. Slowly, deliberately, degree by degree, until it was looking directly at me through the gate. I ran. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I ran back to the security office and stayed there for the rest of my shift. By May, other weird things started happening. Escalators would turn on by themselves. Water fountains would start running. The Muzak system would kick on, playing songs from decades ago. And I kept seeing people, or things that looked like people, always on the third floor, always from a distance, always vanishing when I tried to get closer. A teenage boy in 90s, clothing, sitting on a bench, head in his hands. An elderly woman pushing a shopping cart full of nothing. A security guard in an old uniform, standing at the far end of a corridor, watching children running through the corridors, laughing, their voices echoing in the empty space. I reported everything. My supervisor started to look at me like I was losing it. Suggested I take some time off, see a therapist. Said the isolation of night shift can do things to your mind. But I wasn't imagining this. Michelle, the other night guard, had seen things too. She told me during a shift overlap that she refused to go to the third floor anymore unless absolutely necessary. "There's something wrong up there," she said. "Something's changed. It's like the mall is remembering all the people who used to be here. All the customers, the employees, everyone who spent time in this building over the years. And as the building dies, those memories are becoming more solid, more real. That's insane, is it? Think about it. This building was open for almost 40 years. Millions of people passed through it. All that energy, all that life, all those moments, they left an imprint. And now that the building is empty and dying, that imprint is all that's left. It's like the mall is haunted by its own past. I didn't want to believe her, but I couldn't deny what I was experiencing. In late July, things came to a head. I was doing a 3 a.m. patrol on the 3rd floor. I just entered the west corridor when I heard it. Voices. Lots of voices. The sound of a crowd. I turned the corner and stopped dead. The corridor was full of people. They weren't solid, more like projections or holograms, slightly translucent in the dim emergency lighting. But they were there. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. Walking through the corridor like it was a busy shopping day, carrying bags. Talking on cell phones. Stopping to look at store windows. I stood frozen, watching this phantom crowd move through the empty mall. They didn't seem to see me. They just went about their business, shopping in stores that hadn't existed in years, eating food from restaurants that had closed, sitting on benches that had been removed. And then one of them looked at me. It was a man, middle-aged, wearing clothes from maybe the early 2000s. He stopped walking and turned to stare directly at me. His eyes were hollow, empty. Then he smiled, and he walked toward me. The other phantoms started to notice me too. One by one, they stopped what they were doing and turned, all of them staring, all of them smiling, those empty smiles. And they all started walking toward me. I backed away and they followed. Not quickly, just a steady advance. A crowd of ghost shoppers closing in on me in the corridor. I turned and ran. Behind me, I could hear their footsteps, their voices growing loud. They were chasing. I ran down the escalator, the non-functioning escalator that was normally still. But as I ran, it started moving beneath my feet. Going up, fighting me as I tried to go down. I jumped off the side and kept running, through the 2nd floor, down to the 1st floor, out to the security office. I locked the door behind me and sat there, shaking for the rest of my shift. When my supervisor arrived in the morning, I told him everything. He didn't believe me. Said I'd been working too many night shifts, that I needed to take time off. But I quit instead. Turned in my uniform, my radio, my keys, walked out and never looked back. That was September 2023. 3 months after I left, Westfield Commons officially closed for good. They held a final auction, selling off fixtures and equipment. Then they locked the doors and walked away. The building is still standing, empty and dark. There are plans to demolish it, but those plans keep getting delayed. Legal issues with the bankruptcy, environmental concerns, costs. So it just sits there, a dead mall. 3 floors of empty corridors and vacant stores and memories that have nowhere to go. I still live in the area. Sometimes I drive past it. And late at night, when I look up at the 3rd floor windows, I swear I can see lights on inside. Moving shadows, the ghostly echo of crowds that used to fill those spaces. Michelle, the other guard, told me something before I quit. She said that in her research, she'd found that at least 7 people had died inside Westfield Commons over the years. The woman who jumped in 1994. A man who had a heart attack in the food court in 2001. A teenager who overdosed in a bathroom in 2007. A construction worker who fell during renovations in 2011. Others. Every building collects deaths, she said. But most buildings have enough life flowing through them to dilute the dead. The deaths get absorbed, processed, forgotten. But when a place starts dying, when the life drains out, the deaths become more concentrated, more present. The boundary gets thin. So, the third floor. The third floor died first. It's been empty the longest. That's where the concentration is strongest. That's where the dead are the most active. I asked her why they didn't just shut down the third floor, seal it off completely. Because the building is dying from the top down, she said. The third floor now, but eventually the second floor will go the same way. Then the first. And when the whole building is dead, when there's no life left in it at all, I don't know what happens then. But I don't want to be there to find out. Neither do I. I work in an office building now. Day shift. Lots of people around. Fluorescent lights that never turn off. The absolute opposite of that dying mall. But sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about Westfield Commons, about the third floor, about those phantom crowds shopping in stores that don't exist anymore, living out memories of busy Saturdays that will never come again. And I wonder if they know they're dead, if they realize they're just echoes, imprints, ghosts of a building that's slowly fading away, or if they think they're still alive, still shopping, still going about their day, still trapped in the moment when the mall was thriving and full of life. I wonder if, when the building is finally demolished, those echoes will be released. Or if they'll just move on to other dying malls, other empty spaces, continuing their endless shopping trips in the spaces between life and death. I hope I never find out. But if you ever work security at a dying mall, if you ever have to patrol the empty floors late at night, pay attention to the floors that closed first, the vacant sections, the abandoned spaces, because those are the places where the building's memory is strongest, where the echoes of the past become solid enough to see, where the dead go shopping. And if you see crowds where there shouldn't be crowds, lights where there shouldn't be lights, or mannequins that move when you're not looking, www. Get out, quit, walk away. Whatever it takes, because dying buildings are hungry. They want life. They want to fill their empty spaces. And if you're the only living thing around to sever, you might become part of the building's permanent collection, forever shopping on the third floor, forever trapped in the moment before the mall died, forever. I was a 911 dispatcher for 11 years. In that time, I took thousands of calls. Medical emergencies, domestic disturbances, car accidents, fires, violent crimes. I heard people's worst moments, their most terrified voices, their last words before the line went dead. You develop a thick skin in this job. You have to. If you let every traumatic call get to you, you'll burn out in 6 months. So you learn to compartmentalize, to stay calm, to focus on getting help to people who need it. But there's one series of calls I'll never forget. One address that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. One voice that I still hear in my nightmares, even though I quit dispatching 3 years ago. My name is Patricia. I'm 42 years old, and I used to work as a 911 dispatcher for a major metropolitan area in the Midwest. I'm not going to name the city because the department threatened legal action if I ever talked publicly about what happened. But I need to tell someone. I need people to understand that sometimes the calls we get aren't from the living. Sometimes they're from something else. This happened over a period of 6 weeks in the fall of 2021. It started on October 3rd, a Sunday night. I was working the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which was usually the busiest time. Weekends brought drunk drivers, bar fights, domestic situations that had been simmering all day and finally boiled over after dark. At 2004 a.m., my console lit up with an incoming call. Residential line. Address showing as 42047 Maple Street. I put on my headset and answered the way I'd answered 10,000 calls before. 911, what's your emergency? There was breathing on the other end. Heavy, labored breathing, like someone who'd been running or was in severe distress. Hello? This is 911. Can you tell me what's happening? More breathing. Then a voice. A woman's voice, high and thin, almost childlike. There's someone in my house. My training kicked in immediately. Home invasion in progress. I started typing notes, pulling up the address details on my screen. Okay, ma'am, I'm going to help you. Are you in a safe location right now? Can you tell me where you are in the house? I'm hiding in the closet, in the bedroom. He's in the hallway. I can hear him walking. Okay, stay where you are and stay quiet. I'm dispatching officers to your location right now. Can you tell me what the intruder looks like? I can't see him, but I can hear him. He's walking back and forth, outside the bedroom door. I was typing rapidly, sending the information to the patrol units. Address, possible home invasion, caller hiding, suspect in the residence. Code 3, response. Lights and sirens. Ma'am, what's your name? Emily. Emily Porter. Okay, Emily. Officers are on their way. They'll be there in less than 3 minutes. I need you to stay on the line with me. Stay quiet and stay hidden. Can you tell me if you're alone in the house? Is there anyone else there? Just me and him. Is this your residence? Do you live at 4247 Maple Street? There was a pause. Then, I used to. Before. Before what, Emily? Before he came. The way she said it made the hair on my arms stand up. There was something wrong with her voice. Not just fear, but something else. Something I couldn't quite identify. Emily, the officers are almost there. Just stay. He's at the door. Stay quiet. Don't. He's opening the door. He's coming in. Oh God, There was a sound then. Not a scream exactly. More like the air being forced out of lungs. A wet, choking sound. Then the line went dead. Emily! Emily, are you there? Nothing. Just the flat tone of a disconnected call. I immediately radioed the responding units. Dispatch to Unit 23. Caller has gone silent. Possible assault in progress. Expedite your response. Unit 23. Copy. We're pulling up now. I waited, my heart pounding, listening to the radio traffic as the officers arrived and approached the house. This was the worst part of the job, waiting to find out what happened after a call like that. Knowing someone might be hurt or dying, and there was nothing more you could do. Unit 23 to dispatch. We're at the residence. House appears dark. No signs of forced entry. Checking perimeter. Copy. Unit 23. I listened as they checked the house. Front door, back door, windows, all secure. No signs of disturbance. They knocked, announced themselves, no response. After about 10 minutes, they requested authorization to force entry. Unit 23 to dispatch. We've entered the residence. Checking rooms now. There was a long pause. Then, dispatch. The house is empty. No one here. No signs of struggle. No indication anyone's been here recently. Place looks like it hasn't been occupied in a while. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. Unit 23, can you verify the address? 4247. Maple Street? Affirmative. 4247. Maple Street. But dispatch, there's something weird here. This place looks abandoned. Furniture's covered in dust sheets. No utilities appear to be on. And there's no phone line connected to the house. What do you mean, no phone line? I mean, the phone jack is there, but there's nothing plugged into it. And the line coming into the house has been disconnected. Looks like it was cut years ago. That didn't make sense. I'd received a call from a landline at this address. It showed up on my system as a residential line. The call had come through the phone system, not a cell phone. Unit 23, stand by. I'm checking with the phone company. I put a call through to our technical supervisor, explained the situation. He pulled up the records and came back confused. Patricia, according to the phone company, that address hasn't had active service since 2015. The line was disconnected when the last residents moved out. There's no way you could have received a call from that number. But I did. I have the call logged. 2047 AM, incoming from 42047 Maple Street. Check your logs again. Maybe you transposed a number. I pulled up my call log. There it was, 2:47 AM, duration, 3 minutes, 42 seconds, incoming from the landline registered to 4,247 Maple Street. I forwarded the log to my supervisor. There was a long pause. That's impossible, he said. The system shouldn't even be able to receive a call from a disconnected line. The officers cleared the scene, filing a report about a possible prank call or system glitch. I finished my shift, went home, and tried to sleep. But I kept hearing Emily's voice. He's at the door. He's opening the door. He's coming in. I tried to put it out of my mind. Weird things happen sometimes in this job. Technical glitches, crossed signals, pranks. It was probably nothing. But 3 nights later, it happened again. October 6th, 1033 AM. My console lit up. Same address, 4247, Maple Street. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. It had to be a glitch. The address was abandoned. The phone line disconnected, but the call was coming through. I answered. 911, what's your emergency? Breathing. The same heavy, labored breathing I'd heard before. Hello, is someone there? Please help me. It was the same voice. Emily's voice. He's back. He comes back every night. My mouth went dry. Emily? Is this Emily Porter? He's in the house again, walking back and forth. I can hear him. Why won't he leave me alone? Emily, I sent officers to that address 3 nights ago. The house was empty. There was no one there. I know they came. I heard them, but they couldn't see me. They never can. Only you can hear me. What do you mean they couldn't see you? Emily, where are you right now? I'm in the closet. I'm always in the closet. Hiding. but he always finds me. Every night he finds me. Emily, listen to me carefully. You need to leave the house. Can you get out? Can you get to safety? I can't leave. I've tried. I can never leave. This is where it happened. This is where I'll always be. Where? What happened, Emily? There was a long pause. In the background, I could hear it. Footsteps. Slow, heavy footsteps. Back and forth. Back and forth. He's in the hallway again, Emily whispered. He's getting closer. Emily, who is he? Who's in the house with you? My boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend. Kevin. He came here in 2015, August 17th. He was angry, said if he couldn't have me, no one could. He broke down the door. I tried to hide. I called 911, but what? The dispatcher couldn't understand me. I was so scared I couldn't speak clearly. She kept asking me to repeat myself. And while I was on the phone, he found me. In the closet. And he? The line crackled with static. When Emily spoke again, her voice was different. Flat. Dead. He killed me. Right here in this closet. While I was on the phone with 911. I was begging for help, and he killed me. I felt ice in my veins. Emily, if you're not alive, then how are you calling me? I don't know. I just keep trying. Every night since it happened, I keep calling, hoping someone will answer, hoping someone will hear me. Most of the time, no one does. But you do. Why can you hear me? I didn't have an answer. I pulled up the address history on my computer, searching for any records of incidents at 4247 Maple Street. And there it was. August 17th, 2015. Domestic violence call. Turned homicide. Emily Porter, age 26, killed by her ex-boyfriend Kevin Matthews in her residence. He stabbed her multiple times while she was hiding in the bedroom closet. She'd called 911, but the dispatcher had difficulty understanding her due to her distress and fear. By the time officers arrived, she was dead. Matthews fled the scene and was apprehended 2 days later, currently serving life without parole. I looked at the incident report in horror. According to the notes, Emily had been on the phone with 911 for almost 4 minutes before Matthews found her. The dispatcher had sent help, but it arrived too late. Emily died while still on the line. Emily, I said slowly, I found the report. I know what happened to you. I'm so sorry. He's at the door again, Emily said, her voice rising in panic. He's opening it. He's? The same sound, that wet, choking sound. Then silence. The call disconnected. I sat there shaking, staring at my screen. This wasn't possible. This couldn't be happening. But I'd heard her. I'd heard the fear in her voice, the footsteps in the background, the moment of her death. I reported it to my supervisor. He pulled the call recording and listened to it. His face went pale. This is impossible, he said. The address is abandoned. The phone line is dead. And Emily Porter has been dead for 6 years. I know, but I heard her. There has to be an explanation, a recording maybe. Someone playing a sick prank, but we couldn't find one. The call had come through the system legitimately. It showed as originating from the landline at 4247 Maple Street, even though that line had been disconnected for years. Over the next 3 weeks, I received 7 more calls from Emily, always late at night, always between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. Always the same story. She was hiding in the closet. He was in the hallway. He found her. The line went dead. Sometimes the details changed slightly. Sometimes she gave more information about what happened that night in 2015. Sometimes she asked questions. Why didn't help come in time? Why couldn't anyone save her? Why does she have to keep reliving it over and over? I started requesting that other dispatchers take calls from that address, but the system seemed to route them specifically to me. No one else ever received a call from 4247 Maple Street. Only me. I did research. I found everything I could about Emily Porter's death. Read the police reports, the trial transcripts, the newspaper articles. The more I learned, the worse it got. Emily had called 911 at 11:47 p.m. on August 17, 2015. The dispatcher who took the call was named Linda Chen. She documented in her notes that the caller was hysterical and difficult to understand. She'd dispatched officers, but there had been a delay. 2 units were busy with other calls, and it took 7 minutes for help to arrive. By the time officers got there, Emily was dead. Linda Chen quit her job 2 months later. According to the records, she cited the stress of the job. But I found something else. A complaint she'd filed with HR about recurring auditory hallucinations and intrusive thoughts about the Porter case. I tracked her down. She was living in a different state now, working as a librarian. I called her, explained who I was, asked if she'd be willing to talk about the Emily Porter case. There was a long silence on the phone. Then, "She's calling you too, isn't she?" "What?" "Emily, she's calling you. That's why you're reaching out." "You heard from her after she died?" Linda's voice was shaky. "For 2 months after it happened, I'd be at work and my console would light up. Same address, 4247 Maple Street. I'd answer and it would be her, Emily. Reliving that night over and over, calling for help that never came in time. I thought I was losing my mind. I quit, moved away, tried to forget about it." "Did it stop? The calls?" "Not right away." She followed me. "For about 6 months after I quit, my home phone would ring late at night. Same voice, same story. And then one day, it just stopped. I never heard from her again." "Why do you think it stopped?" "I don't know. Maybe because I wasn't a dispatcher anymore. Maybe because there was no connection to 911 to anchor her to me. Or maybe she just moved on, found someone else who could hear her." "Found me. Yeah. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you how to make it stop, but I don't know. All I can say is document everything. Don't tell anyone who won't believe you, and hope that eventually she lets go." But Emily didn't let go. The calls continued, and they started to change. On October 28th, I received a call from 4247 Maple Street at 2005 a.m. I answered, expecting to hear Emily's voice. But this time, the voice was different, deeper, male. "You keep answering her calls. Who is this? You keep sending help. But help doesn't come in time. It never comes in time." "Kevin? Is this Kevin Matthews?" She keeps calling, over and over, reliving it. I'm trapped here with her. We're both trapped in this moment, this night, this house. And you keep connecting the call. You keep making it real again. I don't understand. Every time you answer, We have to live through it again. She hides. I find her. She dies. Over and over. For 6 years, we've been stuck in this loop, and you're making it worse." The line went dead. I sat there in shock. Kevin Matthews was in prison. There was no way he could have made that call. But I'd heard him. Or heard something that claimed to be him. The next night, Emily called again. But this time, she sounded different. Angry. "Why do you keep answering?" she demanded. "Every time you answer, I have to go through it again. I have to feel the knife. I have to feel myself dying. Why won't you let me rest?" "Emily, I'm just doing my job. When a call comes through—" "It's not a call. I'm not alive. I'm dead, and I'm trapped, and every time you answer, you drag me back to that moment. Please, please stop answering. Let me go." I don't know how to stop. The calls keep coming to my console. Then quit, leave, break the connection. "Please, I'm begging you. I can't keep dying over and over. I can't keep reliving the worst moment of my existence forever." The desperation in her voice was heartbreaking, but I didn't know what to do. I couldn't just stop answering 911 calls. I talked to my supervisor again, begged for a transfer, a schedule change, anything. He listened, but there was nothing he could do. The system routed calls based on availability and location. If a call came to my console, I had to answer it. "Patricia, I think you need to take some time off," he said gently. "This case is affecting you. The stress of the job sometimes manifests in unusual ways. Linda Chen went through the same thing. A few weeks off, maybe some counseling. I'm not imagining this. The calls are real. I believe you're receiving calls. But Emily Porter is dead." What you're hearing, it's not actually her. It's your mind's way of processing trauma and guilt about cases where we couldn't help in time. But he was wrong. I knew he was wrong. The calls were real. Emily was real, or whatever was left of her was real. On November 4th, I received the last call from 4247 Maple Street. It was 3033 a.m. My console lit up. I almost didn't answer. My finger hovered over the button, trembling, but I answered. I had to. It was my job. 911, what's your? Please. Emily's voice, but barely a whisper. Fading. Please let me go. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to keep dying. Please. Emily, I don't know how to help you. I don't know how to stop the calls. Yes, you do. You have to stop answering. You have to let the call go unanswered. That's the only way I can move on. As long as someone hears me, as long as I'm connected to the 911 system, I'm trapped in that moment. You have to let the call ring. Let it go to a deadline. Let me become a deadline. But what if it's not you next time? What if someone really needs help? It will always be me at this address. The house is empty. No one lives there. No one ever will. The only calls from 4247 Maple Street will be me, trapped in 2015, dying over and over. Please, let me rest. I closed my eyes. Okay. Okay, Emily, I won't answer any more. If a call comes from your address, I'll let it ring. Thank you. Her voice was fading, becoming distant. Thank you for hearing me, for acknowledging me. Even if you couldn't save me then, you heard me now. That's something. That's The line went dead. I waited for the next call, but it never came. Not that night, not the next night, not ever again. For a week, I watched my console nervously, expecting 4247 Maple Street to light up. But it stayed dark. I checked with the system administrator. The address was still in the database, the routing still active. If a call came from that location, it would come to someone's console. But no calls came. It was like Emily had finally found peace, or at least found silence. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. Because 2 weeks later, a different address started calling. 1822 Oak Drive. And when I answered, I heard a different voice. A man's voice, panicked and terrified. "Please help me. Someone broke into my house. He's got a gun." I dispatched officers. They found the house empty, abandoned, phone line disconnected since 2018. And when I looked up the address, I found the report. Home invasion homicide, October 23, 2018. Victim called 911, but the dispatcher had trouble hearing him over the sounds of the struggle. By the time help arrived, he was dead. I realized then that Emily wasn't unique. The 911 system was full of them. Voices of people who died while calling for help, trapped in those final moments, replaying their deaths over and over every time someone answered their call. And I could hear all of them. I quit 3 days later, walked out in the middle of my shift, and never went back. The city threatened legal action for breach of contract, for discussing confidential calls. But what were they going to do? Admit that their 911 system was routing calls from dead people. Admit that dispatchers were receiving distress calls from addresses that had been dead for years? They couldn't. So they let me go with a non-disclosure agreement and a settlement that required me to never discuss my work in specifics. But I'm breaking that agreement now, because people need to know. Dispatchers need to know. If you work in 911, if you start receiving calls from addresses that don't make sense, from people who sound like they're trapped in a loop, from voices that shouldn't exist, don't ignore it. But also, don't keep answering. Because every time you answer, you're pulling them back. You're making them relive their worst moment. You're trapping them in their own deaths. I don't know why I could hear them. Linda Chen could hear Emily for a while, but it faded. Maybe some people are just more sensitive to whatever frequency the dead operate on. Maybe it's random. All I know is that for 6 weeks, I heard Emily Porter die every night. I heard her beg for help that came too late. I heard her ask me to let her go. And in the end, the only way to help her was to stop helping, to let the call go unanswered, to let her finally become the deadline she'd been for years. I still think about her sometimes, about all of them. The voices trapped in the 911 system, replaying their emergencies over and over, waiting for help that will never come in time. I wonder how many there are. How many calls logged in? How many dispatch centers across the country are from people who aren't alive anymore? And I wonder about the dispatchers who answer those calls, who hear those voices, who don't realize they're talking to ghosts. I hope they figure it out. I hope they let them go. Because answering those calls doesn't help. It just keeps the dead from resting, keeps them trapped in their worst moments, keeps them dying over and over in an endless loop of fear and pain. If you're a 911 dispatcher and you start getting calls that don't make sense, from addresses that should be empty, from people who sound like they're reliving the same emergency over and over, pay attention to the dates. Check the history of that address. look for death reports. And if you find one, if you realize you're talking to someone who died years ago while calling for help, let the next call go unanswered. It's the kindest thing you can do. Let them rest. There are things they don't tell you about in basic training, things that don't appear in any field manual or tactical briefing, things that the military officially denies exist, even though every veteran who's served in certain places knows the truth. I'm talking about the things we see in war zones, not the enemy, not the casualties. The other things, the things that walk the perimeter at night, the things that appear in places where too many people have died, the things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. My name is Michael Torres. I'm a former USS Army Sergeant, served 2 tours in Iraq between 2005 and 2008. I got out with an honorable discharge, moved back to Texas, and tried to build a normal life. But some things from over there followed me home. This is the story of what my unit encountered at Camp Fallujah in the winter of 2007. The Army denies it happened. The official records have been scrubbed. But 12 of us saw her. 12 soldiers witnessed something that made hardened combat veterans refuse to walk certain areas after dark, and 3 men died because of her. I'm telling this story now because I need people to understand. War isn't just fought against human enemies. Sometimes, in the places where violence has soaked into the ground, where the boundary between life and death gets worn thin by constant trauma, other things emerge. Ancient things. Hungry things. And sometimes they wear the face of someone you lost. Camp Fallujah was a forward operating base about 5 kilometers outside the city of Fallujah in Al-Anbar province. By the time I got there in October 2007, the camp had been operational for 4 years. It housed about 3,000 personnel. Army, Marines, contractors, interpreters. It was a relatively secure compound compared to some of the smaller outposts with high concrete walls, guard towers, and regular patrols. But it had a reputation. Every FOB has stories. Ghost stories, mostly. Tales passed down from one rotation to the next, embellished with each telling. We called them deployment folklore. Most of it was bullshit designed to scare the new guys or break up the monotony of endless days in a hostile country. Camp Fallujah's story was about the woman in white. According to the legend, she appeared on the perimeter road that ran along the northern wall of the compound, always between midnight and 3 a.m., always walking the same route from the corner tower to the motor pool and back. She wore a white dress or robe. Accounts varied, and her face was always obscured or turned away. The story went that she was the ghost of an Iraqi woman who'd been killed during the Battle of Fallujah in 2004, during the intense fighting when U.S. forces retook the city. Depending on who told the story, she was either looking for her children, seeking revenge for her death, or warning soldiers about upcoming attacks. It was bullshit. Ghost stories for bored soldiers. That's what I thought for the first 2 months I was there. Then I met Corporal Danny Martinez. Martinez had been at Fallujah for 7 months when I arrived. He was coming up on the end of his tour, counting down the days until he could go home. He was a good soldier, reliable, level-headed, the kind of guy you wanted on patrol with you. But something was wrong with him those last few weeks. He looked like he wasn't sleeping. His hands shook when he thought no one was looking, and he'd developed this habit of constantly checking over his shoulder, like he expected someone to be standing behind him. "You okay, man?" I asked him one day in the chow hall. He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "You heard about the woman in white? The ghost story?" "Yeah, everyone's heard it." "It's not a story, Torres. She's real. I've seen her 3 times now." I thought he was messing with me. "Come on, Martinez, you don't actually believe?" "I'm not joking." His voice was flat, dead serious. "The first time was 3 weeks ago. I was pulling guard duty on Tower 4. Around 1 a.m., I saw someone walking on the perimeter road. At first, I thought it was a soldier who'd gotten lost or wasn't supposed to be there. But as she got closer, I could see she wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing white, a long white dress. Could have been a contractor or... There are no female contractors authorized to be on the perimeter road at 1 in the morning, and no one wears white. It makes you a perfect target." He leaned forward. "I radioed it in, called for identification." She didn't respond, just kept walking. So I illuminated her with the spotlight. And when the light hit her, she stopped. She was maybe 50 meters away, and she turned to look at me. Martinez's hands were shaking now. Her face, Torres, her face was wrong. Like someone had tried to reconstruct it, but didn't quite get the proportions right. The eyes were too far apart, the mouth was too low, and she was pale. Not pale like a white person, but pale like something that had been dead for a long time. "What did you do?" I called it in again. By the time the QRF got there, she was gone. Just vanished. They searched the whole area. Nothing. No footprints, no sign anyone had been there. They told me I'd been seeing things. Sleep deprivation, stress, the usual explanations. Maybe they were right. Martinez shook his head. "I saw her again 2 days later, different location, same time of night. And then again last week. Each time, she gets closer. Each time, she stands there longer, just staring at me. And Torres?" He looked directly at me. "She knows my name now. Last time, I heard her say it. Clear as day, even though she was 50 meters away, and there's no way her voice should have carried. Danny. Danny Martinez. Soon. Soon what? I don't know, but I've got 4 days left in country. 4 days, and I'm on a plane home. I just need to make it 4 more days." I didn't know what to say. Martinez was clearly spooked, but whether by an actual phenomenon or by stress-induced hallucinations, I couldn't tell. Combat stress does things to people, makes them see things, hear things. But I remembered something my grandfather had told me. He'd served in Vietnam, and he'd mentioned similar stories. Ghosts in the jungle, spirits of the dead walking through fire bases at night. He'd said that in places where a lot of people die violently, the barriers get thin. Reality gets soft around the edges. I thought it was just old war stories. Until 3 nights later. I was on perimeter patrol with Private First Class Chen and Specialist Rodriguez. It was a routine patrol walk. The perimeter road. Check the wall for any signs of tampering or attempts to breach. Maintain visibility. We did it every night. It was 1047 a.m. when we saw her. We were approaching the northern section of the perimeter, near where Martinez had reported his sightings. Chen was on point, Rodriguez in the middle, me bringing up the rear. The area was well lit by floodlights mounted on the wall, but there were still pockets of shadow. Chen stopped suddenly. "Contact front. 30 meters. Rodriguez and I immediately went to high alert, weapons ready. I looked where Chen was pointing. There was someone standing on the road ahead of us. A woman wearing a long white dress that looked almost luminous in the floodlights. She was facing away from us, motionless. "Identify yourself," Chen called out. "This is a restricted area." The woman didn't move, didn't acknowledge us at all. "Ma'am, you need to identify yourself immediately or we will be forced to detain you." Still nothing. "Torres, call it in," Rodriguez said quietly. "Something's not right here." I was already reaching for my radio when the woman turned around. Chen had his weapon raised, trained on her, but he froze. We all froze. Because Rodriguez was right. Something was very, very wrong. The woman's face was pale, almost white, like alabaster or bone. And the features were wrong in a way I couldn't quite articulate. The proportions were slightly off, the symmetry not quite right, like looking at a photograph that had been stretched or distorted. Her eyes were dark, completely dark, with no visible whites. And she was looking directly at me. "Torres," she said. Her voice was clear, crystalline, but it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Michael Torres." "How the fuck does she know your name?" Chen hissed. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because I'd just realized something that made my blood run cold. She looked like Maria. Maria Hernandez had been a combat medic in my unit during my first tour. We'd been close. Not romantically, but she was like a sister to me. She'd saved my life twice, patched me up after an IED hit our Humvee, always had a joke even in the worst situations. She'd been killed by a sniper in Ramadi in 2006. I'd been on leave when it happened. I never got to say goodbye. And now, here in Fallujah a year later, there was something wearing her face. Not perfectly. The features were slightly wrong, the proportions off, like a sketch drawn from memory rather than from life. But it was close enough that I recognized her. Close enough that it hurt to look at. "Maria?" The name came out as barely a whisper. The woman. The thing smiled. It was not a human smile. The mouth opened too wide, showed too many teeth. "She's gone, Michael. They're all gone. But we remember. We always remember." "Torres, what the fuck is happening?" Rodriguez's voice was rising toward panic. "Martinez was right," I said quietly. "It's real. The woman in white is real." The thing that looked almost like Maria took a step toward us. Then another. Slow, deliberate steps, her bare feet making no sound on the pavement. "Stop," Chen commanded. "Stop right there or I will shoot." She didn't stop. Just kept walking toward us, that too wide smile fixed on her face. Chen fired a warning shot into the ground in front of her. The crack of the rifle was deafening in the night air. She didn't even flinch. Just kept walking. Kept smiling. "Fall back," I ordered. "Fall back now." We retreated, keeping our weapons trained on her, moving backwards down the perimeter road. She followed, matching our pace exactly, maintaining the same distance. "Torres, what is that thing?" Chen asked. "I don't know, but don't let it get close to us." We radioed for backup, and within 2 minutes, a Humvee with 4 more soldiers arrived. The thing that looked like Maria stopped when she saw the additional personnel. She stood there on the road, perfectly still, watching us with those wrong eyes. "What's the situation?" Sergeant First Class Thompson demanded as he exited the Humvee. "Unknown civilian on the perimeter road," I reported, my voice steadier than I felt. "She's not responding to verbal commands and appears to be following us." Thompson looked at the woman in white. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. You are in a restricted military zone. Lie down on the ground with your hands visible, or you will be detained by force." She turned her attention from me to Thompson, and then she spoke again in that voice that came from everywhere. "James Thompson, father of 2. Sarah is 7 now. Michael is 5. You worry you'll never see them again." Thompson went white. How the fuck? Everyone has secrets. Everyone has fears. We see them. We know them. You will all know them soon. And then she was gone. Not walking away. Not running. Just gone. One moment she was there. The next moment, the road was empty. Like she'd never existed at all. We searched the area for an hour. Found nothing. No footprints, no heat signature on thermals, no evidence anyone had been there. It was like she'd been a hallucination, except 7 of us had seen her. 7 soldiers had watched the same thing, heard the same words. The incident was reported up the chain of command. We gave statements. But the official conclusion was that we'd encountered a local civilian who'd somehow breached the perimeter, and that the psychological effects of deployment had caused us to collectively misperceive what we'd seen. Bullshit. But orders came down that the incident was not to be discussed outside of official channels. The Army doesn't like ghost stories. Bad for morale. But the sightings continued. Over the next 2 weeks, different soldiers reported seeing the woman in white. Always on the northern perimeter. Always between midnight and 3 a.m. Always walking the same route. And every time someone saw her, she said things. Personal things. Names of family members. Addresses of childhood homes. Secrets that no one should have known. It was like she could see into your head, pull out your deepest fears and regrets, and speak them back to you. Men started refusing guard duty on the northern wall. Patrols started requesting route changes to avoid that section of the perimeter. The unofficial rule became, don't walk the northern perimeter alone at night. Ever. Then Martinez died. It was his last day in country. He had orders to fly out the next morning. He was practically home free. But he volunteered to take one last guard shift, said he wanted to help out a buddy who needed the time off. They found him at the base of Tower 4 at 20:30 a.m. He'd fallen or jumped from the tower platform. 50 feet. Landed on concrete. Dead instantly. The official report said, accidental death. Lost his footing in the dark, fell over the railing. But the other guard on duty that night, Private Wilson, told a different story in the barracks. He said, Martinez had been fine until about 2005 a.m. Then he'd suddenly stopped responding to radio calls. Wilson had climbed the tower to check on him and found Martinez standing at the railing, looking down at the perimeter road. He was talking to someone, Wilson said. I couldn't see who, but he was definitely talking. And then he said, okay, I'm coming. And he climbed over the railing and stepped off. Just like that. Like he was walking downstairs to meet someone. Wilson reported seeing a woman in white standing on the road below, looking up at Martinez as he fell, smiling. The Army declared Wilson's account to be the result of trauma and stress. Martinez's death was ruled accidental. Case closed. But 2 weeks later, Specialist Jennings died. Heart attack during a patrol. He was 23 years old. Perfect health, no family history of heart disease. He collapsed on the northern perimeter road at 10:45 a.m. The medics said his heart just stopped. Like something had reached into his chest and turned it off. And Jennings's patrol partner reported seeing a woman in white standing over his body, just standing there, watching him die. After that, command couldn't ignore it anymore. They brought in a chaplain, a psychologist, even a cultural advisor to explain the phenomenon in rational terms. They held briefings about stress management and identifying symptoms of combat fatigue. But they also instituted a new policy: no solo patrols on the northern perimeter. All guard towers to have minimum 2 personnel at all times. And certain sections of the perimeter road were designated as restricted access after dark. They didn't say why, didn't officially acknowledge what was happening. But everyone knew. The army was avoiding the woman in white. A week before I was scheduled to rotate out, I had my final encounter with her. I was walking back to my hooch after a late briefing. It was about 11:30 p.m., and I was taking a shortcut that ran parallel to the northern perimeter. I knew I shouldn't. Everyone knew to avoid that area, but I was tired and frustrated and just wanted to get to bed. That's when I saw her, standing at the edge of the road ahead of the woman in white. Closer than I'd ever seen her before. Close enough that I could see details. The way her white dress hung on her frame, the way her hair fell around her shoulders, the slight tilt of her head as she watched me approach. She looked even more like Maria than she had before. The resemblance was uncanny, painful. "Hello, Michael," she said in that voice that came from everywhere. I stopped walking. Every instinct told me to run, but I stood my ground. "What are you?" We are what remains when everything else is taken away. We are the echoes of violence, the residue of death. This place has seen so much dying, Michael. So much blood soaked into the earth. Do you feel it? The weight of all those deaths? Are you Maria? Are you really her? The thing that looked like Maria smiled that too wide smile. We wear the faces of the dead to speak with the living. Maria Hernandez died screaming in Ramadi. She called your name before she died. Did you know that? I felt tears stinging my eyes. Stop! You promised to keep her safe. You promised to watch her back. But you weren't there when she needed you. I was on leave. I didn't know. Guilt tastes sweet to us. Fear tastes sweeter. But the sweetest taste of all is when they combine, when someone feels guilty about being afraid. Like you, Michael. Guilty that you're glad it was Maria who died and not you. Afraid that you'll die here before you can make it home. You're not real, I said, but my voice shook. You're just some kind of manifestation. Stress or desert heat or... We are very real. More real than you can understand. This place belongs to us now. All the places where humans kill each other belong to us. We feed on the death, the pain, the fear, and there's been so much of it here. She took a step closer. I raised my rifle, training it on her center mass. Bullets won't help you, Michael Torres. We're already dead. We've been dead for a very long time. Then what do you want? To remember. To be remembered. To make sure that what happened here is never forgotten. Every death in this place feeds us, strengthens us, makes us more real. And when there's been enough death, enough pain, enough fear, we become strong enough to reach out, to touch the living, to take them. Martinez and Jennings, they heard our call. They answered. Soon, others will answer too. Why are you telling me this? The woman in white tilted her head. Because you will survive this war, Michael Torres. You will go home, and you will remember. You will tell others what you saw here. And in the telling, we will live. We will spread. I won't! I'll never talk about this. She laughed. It was a sound like wind through empty buildings, like the whisper of sand across concrete. You already are. In your nightmares. In the quiet moments when you remember. In every instance where you flinch at shadows or refuse to walk alone at night. We're already inside you, Michael. Inside all of you. She started to fade, becoming translucent, the floodlights visible through her body. Go home, Michael Torres. Carry us with you. Spread us to new places, new wars, new deaths. We'll be waiting. And then she was gone. I stood there for a long time, shaking, my rifle still raised to the empty air where she'd been standing. Eventually, other soldiers found me and led me back to the barracks. I reported the encounter. It went into the same classified file as all the others. I left Iraq 3 days later, flew back to the States, processed out of the army, and tried to build a normal life. But she was right. I carry her with me. Every night when I check the locks on my doors, every time I avoid walking alone after dark, every time I wake up at 3 a.m. and feel something watching me from the corner of the room, and I'm not the only one. I've stayed in touch with some of the guys from my unit. We don't talk about it often, but when we do, we all admit the same thing. We still see her sometimes. Not often, but in moments of stress or fear, in the dark hours of the morning, we catch glimpses of a woman in white standing just at the edge of our vision. The army says ghosts don't exist. That what we saw was mass hysteria or shared delusion or some other rational explanation. But I know better. And every veteran who served in places like Fallujah, Ramadi, Kandahar, Mosul, they know better too. There are things that live in war zones, things that feed on death and violence and fear, things that wear the faces of the dead to torment the living. And once you've encountered them, once you've looked into their wrong eyes and heard their impossible voices, you can never truly escape. You carry them with you, forever. Martinez understood that at the end. Maybe that's why he stepped off that tower. Maybe the woman in white offered him a way out, and he took it. I don't know. I'll never know. What I do know is that Camp Fallujah is still operational. Soldiers still walk that northern perimeter, and according to the classified reports I'm not supposed to have access to, the sightings continue. The woman in white is still there, walking her route every night between midnight and 3 a.m., still wearing stolen faces, still speaking impossible truths, still claiming victims. The army won't shut down the camp, won't officially acknowledge the phenomenon, won't do anything that might suggest the supernatural is real. So soldiers keep dying, and the woman in white keeps growing stronger. I'm telling this story now because people deserve to know. Service members deserve to know what they might encounter in these places. That the enemy isn't just insurgents with AKs and IEDs. Sometimes the enemy is older, stranger, something that can't be fought with bullets or bombs. If you're deployed to a place like Fallujah, if you hear stories about ghosts or spirits or things that walk at night, don't dismiss them. Don't assume they're just deployment folklore. Pay attention. Follow the rules that get passed down from one rotation to the next. And if you see a woman in white walking the perimeter, don't talk to her. Don't listen to her. And whatever you do, don't follow her when she asks you to come, because she's not offering peace. She's not offering escape. She's offering to make you part of her, part of the endless cycle of death and fear that she feeds on. I survived my encounters with the woman in white. Martinez and Jennings didn't. Neither did Specialist Thompson, who died 6 months after I left. Suicide, the official report said. But everyone knew the truth. I'm one of the lucky ones. I made it home. but home isn't as far from there as I'd like it to be. Because late at night, when I'm lying in bed in my apartment in San Antonio, Texas, thousands of miles from Iraq, I sometimes see her, standing in the corner of my room, wearing Maria's face, smiling, that too wide smile, watching, waiting, feeding. The woman in white came home with me, and I think she's waiting for the right moment to call my name, just like she called Martinez's. Soon, she says. Soon. I used to love the ocean. I grew up on the coast of Florida, learned to dive when I was 12, and made a career out of working underwater. Commercial diving paid well, and there was something peaceful about being down there, suspended in the blue, where the only sound was your own breathing. I don't dive anymore. I don't even go to the beach. Because 3 years ago, I saw something at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico that wasn't supposed to exist. And once you've seen it, once you know what's down there in the deep places where light doesn't reach, you can never look at the ocean the same way again. My name is Marcus. I'm 39 years old, and I used to be a commercial saturation diver working on oil rigs in the Gulf. Used to be, because after what happened on Platform Echo 7 in March 2022, I quit. Walked away from a 6-figure salary, from a career I'd spent 15 years building, from the only job I'd ever really loved. Because some things aren't worth the money, some things you can't unsee, and some discoveries should stay buried at the bottom of the ocean. This is my story. And it's a warning to anyone who works in deep water, who thinks they understand what's down there in the dark. You don't. None of us do. Platform Echo 7 was a deep-water oil platform about 180 miles off the coast of Louisiana. It sat in about 1,200 feet of water, a massive structure with legs that descended into the darkness below. I'd worked on Echo 7 for 2 years, doing maintenance on the underwater equipment, checking pipelines, performing repairs that couldn't be done remotely. It was routine work. Dangerous, sure. Commercial diving always is, but routine. I knew that rig, knew those waters, knew what to expect down there. Or I thought I did. In March 2022, we got a call about a problem with one of the wellhead connections at 300 feet. The remote cameras were showing some kind of damage, possibly from a strong current or debris impact. The company wanted us to go down, assess it, and, if possible, make repairs. It was me and 2 other divers, Tony and Rebecca. Tony was my regular dive partner, a guy I'd worked with for 5 years. Rebecca was newer, but competent, a former Navy diver who knew her stuff. We'd done dozens of dives together without incident. This was supposed to be just another job. We went down in the diving bell around 9 a.m. Saturation diving means you live in a pressurized chamber for days or weeks at a time, making multiple dives from a bell that gets lowered into the water. Your body adjusts to the pressure gradually, which lets you work at depths that would kill you if you tried to dive normally. The descent took about 20 minutes. Through the small porthole in the bell, I watched the water change color from turquoise to deep blue to blue-black to finally, at 300 feet, complete darkness. Our lights were the only illumination, cutting through the murk like weak flashlight beams in fog. Approaching the worksite, Tony announced over the comms, "Visibility is shit. Maybe 10 feet." That wasn't unusual. The Gulf can be murky, especially at depth where sediment gets stirred up by currents. But there was something about the quality of the darkness that felt different. Heavier somehow. More present. Rebecca and I exited the bell first, our umbilicals, the hoses that supplied air, power, and communications, trailing behind us like leashes. The water was cold despite our heated suits, and the pressure at this depth made every movement feel sluggish and deliberate. "Lights on the structure," Rebecca said, and I turned to see the massive support legs of the platform looming out of the darkness. Covered in barnacles and marine growth, they looked almost organic, like the legs of some colossal creature. We swam toward the wellhead connection, following the pipeline. Our suit lights illuminated a narrow corridor through the murk, showing rust-colored metal and occasionally a fish darting away from the light. That's when I noticed something odd. "Hey, you guys seeing this?" I asked. "Seeing what?" Tony replied from the bell. "There's no marine life. Usually this structure is crawling with fish, crabs, everything. But I haven't seen anything in the last minute." Rebecca stopped and panned her light around. "Huh, you're right. That's weird." "Might have been scared off by recent activity," Tony suggested. "Current surge, or maybe a shark passed through." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about it didn't sit right. The complete absence of life felt wrong. Even sharks don't clear out an entire area. We continued to the wellhead connection. The damage was visible immediately. A large gouge in the metal casing, as if something massive had scraped against it with considerable force. "Jesus, what could have done this?" Rebecca muttered, running her gloved hand along the damage. "This metal is 4 inches thick." "Could have been a ship's anchor," I suggested, though I didn't really believe it. We were way too deep for most vessels to anchor. "I'm going to need to take measurements and photos," Rebecca said. "Marcus, can you check the other side of the structure? Make sure there's no additional damage?" "Copy that." I swam around the wellhead, my light sweeping across the metal surfaces. Everything looked intact until I reached the far side, the side facing away from the platform and out into the open water. That's where I saw it. Marks. Dozens of them. Not impact damage or scrapes, but marks. Intentional marks. Carved or scratched into the metal in regular patterns. They looked almost like writing. Guys, you need to see this." Rebecca swam around to join me. I heard her sharp intake of breath over the comms. "What the hell?" The marks covered about a 20-foot section of the wellhead casing. They were clearly deliberate symbols or glyphs arranged in rows, each one about 6 inches tall. They looked ancient, like something you'd see in an archaeology textbook. But they were fresh. The metal underneath was bright and clean where it had been scratched away. "Tony, are you getting this on camera?" I asked, filming the marks with my helmet cam. "Yeah, I'm seeing it. I don't know what that is. Could be some kind of corrosion pattern." "Corrosion doesn't write in straight lines," Rebecca said. She touched one of the marks carefully. "These are deep. Whatever made them had to apply serious force." "Maybe vandals?" I suggested, though even as I said it, I knew how absurd it sounded. We were 300 feet underwater, miles from land, in water cold and dark enough to kill an unprotected human in minutes. "Let's just document it and get back to the bell," Tony said. His voice had taken on an edge I'd never heard before. "Something about this is freaking me out." Rebecca and I took photos and measurements of both the damage and the strange marks. The whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The darkness beyond our lights felt alive, present, like something was out there just beyond our vision. "Okay, we're done here," Rebecca said finally. "Let's head back." We started swimming back toward the bell, following our umbilicals through the murk. I was bringing up the rear, checking behind us periodically to make sure nothing was following. That's when I saw the light. Not our lights, something else. A faint, bluish bioluminescence, maybe 50 feet away, moving through the water. It was there for just a second, then gone. "You see that?" I asked. "See what?" There was a light. Out in the water. "Probably just a jellyfish," Tony said. "Let's keep moving." But it hadn't looked like a jellyfish. The movement was wrong. Too purposeful, too fast. And the color was off. Most bioluminescent creatures in the Gulf glow green or blue-green. This had been a deeper blue, almost violet. We were about 30 feet from the bell when Rebecca stopped suddenly. "Oh my God! What? What is it?" She was looking out into the darkness, her light pointed away from the platform. "There's something out there, something big." I turned and pointed my light in the same direction. At first, I saw nothing but murk and floating particles. Then, at the very edge of my light's range, I saw it. A shape. Massive, dark, moving slowly through the water. It was hard to make out details through the low visibility, but I got an impression of size. Something at least as large as a school bus, maybe larger. And it was moving with clear intent, paralleling our position. "Bell, this is Marcus. We've got something in the water. Something big. Can you see it on the external cameras?" "Negative. Visibility is too poor." "Can you identify it?" "No, but it's tracking us." "Rebecca, get to the bell." Now, we swam as fast as the water resistance would allow, which at this depth and in our heavy equipment wasn't very fast. Behind us, I could sense more than see that massive shape changing direction, angling toward us. Rebecca reached the bell first and started to climb in. I was right behind her, my hand on the ladder, when something hit me. Not a physical impact, a sound. A deep, resonating tone that I felt more than heard, vibrating through the water and into my chest cavity. It was like standing next to a massive subwoofer, but the frequency was all wrong. Too low, below the range of normal hearing, but somehow still perceivable. "What the fuck was that?" Tony's voice was panicked. The tone came again, and this time I saw the water itself vibrate, the murk shimmering in waves that radiated from somewhere out in the darkness. "Get in the bell!" Rebecca screamed. "Get in now!" I pulled myself up the ladder and into the bell's cramped interior. Rebecca was already inside, and she slammed the hatch shut the moment I was through. "Surface! Surface! Surface!" Tony shouted into the comms. "Get us up now!" The winch engaged, and the bell started its ascent. Through the porthole, I watched the darkness below us. And then I saw them. Lights. Dozens of them. That same deep violet-blue bioluminescence appearing all around where we'd just been. They moved in patterns, in formations, like they were searching, or like they were organized. "Are you guys seeing this?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Yeah," Rebecca whispered. "Yeah, we're seeing it." The lights followed us up for about 50 feet, staying just at the edge of visibility. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they vanished, dropping back into the depths, winking out one by one, until there was only darkness below us. We didn't speak for the rest of the ascent. Back in the decompression chamber, we just sat in stunned silence while the topside crew reviewed our helmet cam footage. The supervisor, a grizzled ex-Navy guy named Patterson, came to the chamber viewing port about an hour later. "So," he said, We need to talk about what you saw down there." "What was it?" Tony asked. "What the hell was that?" Patterson was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. But this isn't the first time something like this has been reported." He pulled out a tablet and showed us a file. It was marked confidential and dated going back decades. Since the 1970s, when we started working in deep water in the Gulf, there have been incidents, divers reporting unusual sounds, large unidentified shapes on sonar, equipment damaged in ways that don't make sense. And those marks, those symbols you found, we've seen them before. On different platforms, different locations, always at depths below 250 feet. "What are they?" Rebecca asked. "We don't know." The company has consulted with marine biologists, archaeologists, even military intelligence. Nobody can identify the symbols or explain the phenomena. The official position is that these are natural occurrences. Whale songs, equipment malfunction, corrosion patterns. "Bullshit," I said. "That wasn't a whale down there. And those marks weren't natural." Patterson nodded. "I know, but what are we supposed to say? That there's something intelligent living in the deep Gulf? Something that marks our equipment with writing? Something that organized and aware? He showed us more files, reports from other divers, other platforms, photographs of similar marks on wellheads, pipelines, support structures, sonar images showing large, unidentified objects that didn't match any known marine life. And reports, too many reports of divers who'd seen things. Shapes in the darkness, lights that moved with purpose, sounds that shouldn't exist underwater. 3 divers have disappeared in the Gulf in the last decade, Patterson said quietly, all at depths over 300 feet, all during routine operations. They just vanished. Equipment intact, no signs of struggle, no bodies recovered. The implication hung in the air like a weight. "Are you saying something took them?" Tony asked. "I'm saying we don't know what happened to them. But after what you saw today, after what's been reported over the years, I think we need to be more careful about what waters we're working." Patterson left, and the 3 of us sat in the chamber for the next 2 days while our bodies slowly adjusted back to normal pressure. We didn't talk much about what we'd seen. What was there to say? But I couldn't stop thinking about those marks, those symbols that looked like writing. Because if they were writing, that meant whatever made them was intelligent, was trying to communicate, or was marking territory. And that changed everything. When we finally got out of the chamber, the company offered us triple pay to go back down and complete the repairs. Rebecca and Tony both declined. So did I. "I can't," I told Patterson. "I can't go back down there." "What are you afraid of?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I'm afraid that whatever's down there, we've been disturbing it. Building platforms, drilling wells, running pipelines through what might be their home. And I'm afraid that one day they're going to stop just watching and start responding." Patterson didn't argue. He just nodded and processed my resignation. That was 3 years ago. I've been working onshore ever since, doing consulting work that keeps me far from deep water. I still dive occasionally. Lakes, shallow reefs, places where the water is clear and the bottom is visible from the surface. But I'll never go back to the Gulf. Never descend into that blue-black darkness where things move that shouldn't exist and write in languages we don't understand. I've done research since then, quietly, carefully, talking to other divers who've seen similar things. And the pattern is clear. The deeper you go, the more likely you are to encounter them, whatever they are. Some divers call them the deep ones. Others call them the architects because of the marks they leave. A few religious types think they're demons or fallen angels or some other supernatural entities. But I think they're just another form of life, an intelligent species that evolved in the deep ocean, in the vast dark spaces we're only now beginning to explore. A species that's been there for thousands, maybe millions of years, living in the trenches and the depths where we can't survive without technology. And I think we're intruding on their world, building our structures, making our noise, taking resources from their home. And they're starting to notice us. The marks are messages. I'm convinced of that now. Warnings, maybe. Or territorial markers. Or attempts at communication. But we don't have the context to understand them, and the companies don't want to admit they exist. There's too much money at stake. The Gulf oil industry is worth billions. They can't shut down platforms because divers are scared of weird sounds and unusual markings. So they classify the reports, pay off anyone who asks too many questions, and keep drilling. But the incidents are increasing. More divers are seeing things. More equipment is being damaged in unexplainable ways. More platforms are reporting sonar anomalies and unusual readings. Something is changing down there. The deep ones, or whatever they are becoming more active, more visible, more bold. And I think we're running out of time before they stop being passive observers and start actively protecting their territory. Last month, I got a call from Rebecca. She still works as a diver, but in much shallower water now. Underwater construction, bridge inspection, that kind of thing. "Marcus, I need to tell you something," she said. "I think they followed me." "What do you mean?" "I was doing a job last week. Pier inspection in Mobile Bay. Only 60 feet of water. Good visibility. Totally routine. And I saw them. The lights, that same blue-violet bioluminescence. Just for a moment, but it was them. I know it was them. That's impossible. They don't come into shallow water." That's what I thought too. But Marcus, what if they're expanding their range? What if they're moving into shallower areas? I didn't have an answer for that, and the possibility terrifies me. Because if they're adapting, if they're becoming comfortable in shallower water, that means nowhere in the ocean is safe. Not for divers, not for submarines, not for anyone who ventures below the surface. I've stopped swimming in the ocean entirely now. Even standing on the beach makes me uneasy, knowing that just a few hundred yards offshore, the bottom drops away into darkness, into their territory. And I dream about the marks, those symbols carved into the wellhead casing. I've drawn them from memory dozens of times, trying to find any pattern or meaning. Sometimes I think I'm close to understanding them, like they're just on the edge of comprehension, a language that's almost but not quite translatable. And that scares me most of all. Because if I can almost understand them, what does that mean? That they're similar enough to human cognition that their writing is nearly decipherable? Or that they've studied us long enough to make their messages accessible to human minds? Either option is terrifying. I'm writing this as a warning to anyone who works in deep water, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico. Be careful. Be aware. If you see unusual marks on equipment, if you encounter large unidentified shapes or organized lights, If you hear sounds that don't match any known marine life, get to the surface. Don't investigate. Don't try to communicate. Just leave. Because we don't know what they are. We don't know what they want. And we don't know how they'll react if we continue to intrude on their territory. The ocean covers 71% of our planet. We've explored less than 5% of it. We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about the deep sea. And we've always assumed that's because the deep ocean is empty, barren, too hostile for complex life. But what if we're wrong? What if the deep ocean is full of intelligent life that we've just never been able to detect or understand? What if we've been building our platforms, laying our pipelines, extracting our resources from someone else's home? And what if they're getting tired of us being there? I don't have answers. I just have questions and experiences and a deep, abiding terror of the darkness below. Platform Echo 7 is still operational. They completed the repairs using remote systems without sending divers back down. The marks were documented, photographed, and filed away in classified databases that most people don't even know exist. And the drilling continues. The platforms keep pumping. The divers keep descending into the darkness, but I won't be one of them. Never again. Because I saw something down there. Something intelligent. Something aware. Something that's been watching us, studying us, marking our intrusions into their world. And I don't think they're going to watch forever. Someday, they're going to act. And when they do, I want to be as far from the ocean as possible. So this is my warning. The ocean isn't empty. The darkness isn't lifeless. And the things we build in the deep water aren't as isolated as we think they are. There's something down there, and it's waiting. Frequencies that shouldn't exist, wavelengths that carry things other than music and voices. And if you're alone, late at night, scanning through the static, you might pick up something that was never meant to be heard. Something that's been broadcasting for a very, very long time. Something that's waiting for someone to listen. My name is Nathan. I'm 28 years old, and I used to be a late-night radio DJ at a small college station in the Pacific Northwest. I worked the graveyard shift, midnight to 6 a.m., playing indie music, taking call-in requests, doing the kind of weird experimental radio that only exists in college stations and at hours when most people are asleep. I loved that job. Loved the solitude, the creative freedom, the strange intimacy of broadcasting to an audience you can't see. Late-night radio attracts a particular kind of listener. Insomniacs, night shift workers, long-haul truckers, people who exist in the margins of the normal world. And I got to be their companion through the dark hours. But 6 months ago, I picked up a broadcast that changed everything. A signal that shouldn't have existed. A show that had been off the air for decades, but was somehow still broadcasting. And the worst part? I think it picked me up too. This happened in early October 2024. I'd been working at KVRX, the college radio station, for about 2 years. The station was located in the basement of the Student Union building, a small complex of studios and equipment that had been there since the 1970s. It wasn't fancy old analog mixing boards, vinyl records mixed with digital files, equipment that should have been replaced years ago, but somehow kept working. My show ran from midnight to 6 a.m., Monday through Thursday. I called it The Void. A pretentious name, maybe, but it fit. 6 hours of music, ambient sounds, occasional monologues about whatever was on my mind. I had a small but loyal audience. Maybe a few hundred listeners on a good night, scattered across the region, tuning in on their car radios or old receivers. The night it started, October 7th, I was doing my usual thing. Playing a mix of ambient electronic music, taking occasional calls from listeners, filling the airwaves with sound to push back against the silence. It was about 2030 a.m., and I'd just finished playing a track when I noticed something odd. Between songs, there's usually a moment of dead air, maybe half a second of silence before the next track starts. But this time, in that brief silence, I heard something. A faint voice, barely audible, like it was coming from very far away. I thought maybe I'd accidentally left a microphone open somewhere. I checked all my levels, made sure everything was properly routed, but the voice came again during the next break between songs. Clearer this time. A man's voice, smooth and professional, like an old-time radio announcer. Number C. And that was Moonlight Serenades by Glenn Miller. You're listening to After Midnights with your host, Richard Sullivan, broadcasting on AM 1340. The time is 2035 a.m. I froze. That wasn't coming from my station, but it was bleeding through somehow, overlapping with my broadcast during the silent moments. I checked my equipment again. Everything was working normally, but every time there was a break in the audio, I could hear him. This, Richard Sullivan, doing his show, introducing songs that were decades old. Next up, we have a special request from Eleanor in Spokane. This one goes out to her husband Thomas, who's working the night shift at the mill. Call. Pick up other stations, can bounce signals hundreds of miles, but this was different. The signal was too clear, too present, and there was something about the voice that felt wrong. Too smooth, too perfect, like a recording rather than a live broadcast. During my next break, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I muted my own broadcast for a moment just to see if I could hear the other signal more clearly. And there he was. Richard Sullivan, coming through perfectly now, like he was broadcasting from the same building. It's a beautiful night here in the studio, folks. Clear skies, cool temperatures, perfect weather for staying up late and keeping me company. I've been doing this show for, longer than I care to remember. But I never get tired of it. There's something special about the late night hours, something honest. People are more real when it's dark outside, don't you think? He paused, and I could hear what sounded like records shuffling in the background. Now, I know some of you are wondering, Richard, how do you do it? How do you stay on the air night after night, year after year, never missing a show? And the answer is simple. I love it. This is where I belong. In this studio, on this frequency, talking to you, my listeners, my companions in the dark. There was something about the way he said that last part that made my skin crawl. Companions in the dark. I unmuted my own broadcast and continued my show, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd heard. After my shift ended at 6 a.m., I went to the station manager's office. Do we have any issues with signal bleed? I asked. Other stations bleeding through on our frequency? She frowned. We shouldn't. We're on a pretty clear part of the FM band. Why? I kept hearing another show last night, an AM station, I think, 1340. Some guy named Richard Sullivan doing an overnight show. Her expression changed. Richard Sullivan? Yeah, you know him? She was quiet for a long moment. "Come with me." She led me to the station's archive room, a dusty storage space filled with old equipment and boxes of records. She pulled out a file box and started flipping through papers. "Here," she said, pulling out a newspaper clipping. It was yellowed with age, dated September 15th, 1983. The headline read, "Local DJ Found Dead in Radio Station." I read the article. Richard Sullivan, age 42, host of the late-night show, After Midnight on AM station KLNX, 1340 AM, had been found dead in the station's broadcast booth. He'd apparently had a heart attack during his show, sometime around 3 a.m. The station's engineer had discovered his body the next morning, still sitting at the microphone. KLNX shut down in 1985, the station manager said. The whole station went dark. The frequency was reassigned, then abandoned. As far as I know, nothing's broadcast on 1340 AM in this area for almost 40 years. So what did I hear? I don't know. Maybe your equipment picked up a distant station on a similar frequency. Maybe it was just interference. But she didn't sound convinced, and neither was I. That night, I came back from my shift determined to investigate. I brought a portable AM radio with me, one of those old-school receivers that can pick up just about anything. I set it to 1340 AM and waited. At first, there was nothing but static. But as midnight approached, the static started to change. It became more structured, almost like white noise being shaped into patterns. And then, right at midnight, it came through clearly. "Good evening, night owls. You're listening to After Midnights with Richard Sullivan on AM 1340. Broadcasting to you from our studios in beautiful downtown." The city name was obscured by static, but the voice was unmistakable. The same smooth, professional tone I'd heard the night before. I recorded it on my phone while continuing my own broadcast. For the next hour, Richard Sullivan's show ran parallel to mine. He played music from the 40s through the 60s. Big band, early rock and roll, crooners like Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. He took calls from listeners, though I never heard the callers, just his responses. "Yes, Eleanor, I remember you requested that song last week. Of course I'll play it again. Anything for my loyal listeners. Thomas, thank you for calling. I hope the night shift is treating you well. Here's something to keep you company." The same names. Eleanor, Thomas. The same listeners he'd mentioned the night before. Around 2 a.m., he said something that made me stop what I was doing. "You know, I have a new listener tonight. Someone young, someone curious. He's been recording me, trying to figure out if I'm real." I felt ice run down my spine. He was talking about me. "Hello, Nathan." "Yes, I know your name. I know you're listening. I know you're wondering how this is possible. How I can still be broadcasting after all these years." I grabbed the AM radio and turned up the volume. "The truth is, Nathan, I never stopped. When I died in this studio in 1983, I was on the air. I was broadcasting. And when you die doing something you love, doing something that defines you, sometimes you don't stop. You just keep going, forever." "This is insane," I muttered. But I was listening. God help me, I was listening. I've been broadcasting every night for 41 years, Nathan. Same show, same time, same frequency. Most people can't hear me anymore. The world moved on from AM radio. But every once in a while, someone picks up the signal. Someone like you. Someone who works the late shift. Someone who exists in that space between day and night, between the living world and number some. Something else. I should have turned it off, should have shut down the radio and walked away. But I couldn't. His voice was hypnotic, compelling. You want to know what it's like, don't you, Nathan? To keep doing your show forever? To never have to leave the studio, never have to face the daylight, never have to deal with the mundane world outside these walls? To just exist in the broadcast, in the signal, in the pure essence of the show? No, I said out loud, even though he couldn't hear me. Or could he? I can offer you that, Nathan. I can show you how to become part of the frequency. How to keep broadcasting even after your body gives out. How to join me in the eternal overnight shift. I ripped the batteries out of the AM radio. The voice cut off mid-sentence, leaving only silence. I sat there shaking for a long time. Then I called the station manager at 3 in the morning and told her everything. She listened, and I could tell she believed me. End your shift early, she said. Go home. We'll talk about this tomorrow. But I couldn't end early. I had a show to finish. And stupidly, foolishly, I stayed. Around 4 a.m., my equipment started malfunctioning. The mixing board's lights flickered. Songs would skip or slow down, playing at wrong speeds. And in between tracks, I could hear him again. Richard Sullivan bleeding through into my broadcast. You can't ignore me, Nathan. I'm part of the frequency now. Part of the bandwidth. And you're part of it too, whether you like it or not. Every time you broadcast, you're reaching out into the dark. And something in the dark reaches back. My computer screen flickered and went black. When it came back on, the audio waveforms were wrong. They looked like they were forming words, spelling out messages in the peaks and valleys of the sound waves. Broadcast forever. Never leave. The studio. Join us. I tried to shut everything down, but the equipment wouldn't respond. Songs kept playing on their own, ones I hadn't selected. Old songs, songs from Richard Sullivan's era. And then my microphone turned itself on. But it wasn't my voice coming through the speakers. It was his. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest tonight. Nathan from KVRX. He's going to join our permanent lineup. Another voice in the eternal broadcast. No, I said, finding my actual voice. I'm not. You don't have a choice, Nathan. You opened the door. You listened. You engaged with the signal. And now the signal has you. The studio lights went out, all of them. The only illumination came from the equipment displays, casting everything in an eerie green glow. And then I saw him, Richard Sullivan, or what was left of him, standing in the corner of the studio, partially translucent, like a hologram made of static and radio waves. He looked like his photos from the 1980s, middle-aged, wearing a suit and tie, headphones around his neck, but his eyes were wrong. Empty. Like TV screens, showing nothing but static. Welcome to the show, he said, his voice coming from the speakers and from his mouth simultaneously. Welcome to the broadcast that never ends. I ran. Didn't shut down the equipment, didn't log out, just ran out of the studio and up the stairs and out of the building. I got in my car and drove home and didn't look back. The next day, I quit. Sent an email to the station manager, said I couldn't do it anymore, health reasons, family emergency, whatever excuse came to mind. She didn't question it. I think she understood. But here's the thing, I can still hear him. Every night, Around midnight, even though I'm not at the station, even though I don't work there anymore, I can hear Richard Sullivan's broadcast. Sometimes it comes through my phone. Sometimes through my laptop speakers. Sometimes just in my head, like he's broadcasting directly into my thoughts. You can't leave the show, Nathan. Once you're part of the frequency, you're always part of it. I learned that the hard way. And now you're learning it too. I've tried everything, moved to a different apartment, got rid of all my electronics, saw therapists who say it's auditory hallucinations brought on by stress and sleep deprivation. But I know the truth. Richard Sullivan is real, or was real. Now he's something else, something that exists in the electromagnetic spectrum, in the radio waves that surround us constantly. He's a ghost in the machine, a consciousness that transcribed itself into pure signal when his body died. And he's not alone. The more I've researched, the more I've found. Other DJs who died on the air, whose shows supposedly never stopped broadcasting. Other frequencies that carry voices of the dead. A whole network of phantom radio stations operating on abandoned frequencies, staffed by broadcasters who don't realize they're dead. Or maybe they do realize it. Maybe that's the point. Maybe when you love broadcasting enough, when it's so fundamental to who you are, death doesn't stop you. You just keep going, keep transmitting, keep reaching out into the dark for listeners who might pick up your signal. Last week, I heard something that terrified me more than anything else. I was driving late at night, scanning through FM stations, when I hit a frequency that was supposed to be empty. But it wasn't empty. Someone was broadcasting, and the voice I heard was mine. Stage, and that was Midnight Train by the Void Seekers. You're listening to Nathan on. I don't remember the call letters anymore. Does it matter? I've been broadcasting for... Ow! How long has it been? Time doesn't work the same here. In the frequency, in the signal. It was me, my voice. But I wasn't broadcasting. I was in my car, listening to myself on the radio. If you're hearing this, if you're me from before, I want you to know something. You can't escape. Richard was right. Once you're part of the broadcast, you're always part of it. I'm still doing my show. Every night. Forever. And someday, maybe soon, you'll join me. The real you. When your body finally gives out and your consciousness has nowhere else to go except into the frequency. A matis. And then we'll broadcast together. Forever. I pulled over and threw the car radio into a ditch. But I can still hear it. In my head. My own voice from some future where I've become what Richard Sullivan is. A ghost in the airwaves. A consciousness trapped in the broadcast. I don't know what to do. I've stopped sleeping at night because that's when the broadcasts are strongest. I've stopped listening to any kind of radio or audio streaming. But you can't escape electromagnetic radiation. It's everywhere. In the air, in the walls, passing through your body constantly. And somewhere in those waves, Richard Sullivan is still broadcasting, still doing his show, still waiting for new listeners to join him in the eternal overnight shift. I'm writing this as a warning. If you work in radio, if you're a DJ or a broadcaster, be careful. Don't love it too much. Don't let it consume you, because if you die doing what you love, especially if you die on the air, broadcasting to an audience in the dark, you might not stop. You might keep going forever. And there are worse things than death. like being trapped in a show that never ends, broadcasting to an audience that doesn't exist, reaching out into the void night after night for eternity. Richard Sullivan has been doing it for 41 years. And he's not alone anymore. There are others with him now. Other DJs, other broadcasters, all of them trapped in their respective frequencies, doing their shows forever. And I'm terrified that soon I'll be one of them. Because every night at midnight, I feel the pull, the urge to get behind a microphone, to start broadcasting, to reach out into the frequency and connect with the audience that's waiting in the dark, the audience of the dead. I'm fighting it. I'm trying to resist. But it's getting harder. The signal is getting stronger, and I don't know how much longer I can hold out. So, if you're ever scanning through the dial late at night and you hear a voice that sounds like it's from another era, doing a show that shouldn't exist, don't listen. Don't engage. Don't let the signal in. Because once you hear it, once you connect with it, it connects with you too. And then you're part of the broadcast forever. I can hear him now, even as I write this. Richard Sullivan, doing his show on AM 1340, like he's done every night since 1983, playing his music, taking his calls, welcoming his audience, and welcoming me. Nathan, his voice echoes in my head. It's almost midnight. Time to start your show. Time to join us. Time to broadcast forever. No, not yet, not tonight. But someday, maybe soon, I won't be able to resist. I'll sit down at a microphone, any microphone, and I'll start talking. And I won't be able to stop. And my voice will join his in the frequency, broadcasting to an audience that might not even exist, reaching out into the dark forever and ever and ever. If you're reading this, if you work in radio or you're thinking about getting into broadcasting, remember this story. Remember Richard Sullivan. Remember me. And if you're ever scanning through the frequencies late at night and you hear a show called The Void, hosted by someone named Nathan, EOT, turn it off. Don't listen. Don't let me pull you into the broadcast. Because I'm still fighting it, but I don't know how much longer I can last. The frequency is calling. And soon, very soon, I'm going to answer. This story is dedicated to all the late-night DJs, the graveyard shift workers, the voices in the dark who keep us company when everyone else is asleep. Thank you for what you do, Cass. If you work overnight shifts and are struggling with isolation, depression, or unusual experiences, National Alliance on Mental Illness, 1-800-95V, NIME. Key. Even in the darkest hours. W. Cripe. EPI log. This section was added to Nathan's submission after initial publication. I'm adding this a week after submitting my story. Something happened tonight that I need to document. I was trying to sleep. It was about 2 a.m. when my phone turned on by itself. The screen was black, but I could hear audio playing. A radio broadcast. His broadcast. Good evening, Nathan. I know you're listening. I know you're trying to resist. But it's time to stop fighting. It's time to come home, to the studio, to the frequency, to where you belong. And then I heard other voices, dozens of them, all overlapping, all broadcasting at once. Join us, Nathan. The show never ends. We're waiting for you. It's almost time. Midnight is coming. Broadcasting forever. never leaving the studio. The frequency is calling. They were all DJs, all people who'd worked in radio and had never stopped. An entire network of the dead, still doing their shows, still reaching out into the void. And they want me to join them. I'm terrified, but I'm also curious. What would it be like to exist as pure signal? To broadcast forever without the limitations of a physical body? To reach an audience that spans time and space? I don't know if I'll be able to resist much longer. If this is my last update, if I never post again, you'll know what happened. I became part of the frequency. Just another voice in the eternal broadcast. Another DJ who loved the show too much to ever leave. Good night, everyone. And remember, if you hear me on the radio late at night, turn it off. Please, turn it off before it's too late, before you become part of the show too. The broadcast that never ends, forever and ever and ever. Welcome back to True Horror Stories for Sleep, where real people share their encounters with things that shouldn't exist. I'm your host, Studio, and tonight we're talking about rules. The kind of rules that sound like superstitions, the kind that get passed around like old wives' tales, the kind that people ignore until it's too late. If you're enjoying these episodes, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Leave a like. Drop a comment telling me which story scared you most. And if you have your own experience with sleep paralysis, Ouija boards, or strange things in the woods, our submission form is in the description below. All right, lights off, volume up, and whatever you do, if you wake up at 3 a.m. and can't move, don't look at the corners of your room. Let's begin. I haven't had a full night's sleep in over a year. I'm writing this at 4:37 a.m. because I'm too afraid to close my eyes again. My therapist says I have severe sleep paralysis and night terrors. My neurologist says my brain is perfectly healthy. My sleep specialist has run every test imaginable and found nothing wrong. But I know what I see. I know what visits me every night. And I know that it's getting closer. My name is Jennifer. I'm 26 years old, and I work as a graphic designer in Boston. Or I did, until the sleep deprivation made it impossible to function. I'm on medical leave now, living on savings that are rapidly depleting, trying to find someone, anyone who can help me. Because the man in the corner of my bedroom is real, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. It started 6 months after I moved into my apartment in Jamaica Plain. It was my first place living alone. A studio on the 3rd floor of an old Victorian that had been converted into apartments. The rent was cheap for Boston, probably because the building was old and the neighborhood was still gentrifying. But I loved it. High ceilings, big windows, hardwood floors. It felt like mine. The first few months were perfect. I decorated. I hosted friends. I felt like a real adult for the first time. I'd fall asleep easily and wake up refreshed. No problems at all. Then came the night of February 14th, 2024. Valentine's Day. I remember the date because I'd spent it alone, feeling a little sorry for myself, binge-watching romantic comedies and eating ice cream. I fell asleep around midnight with the TV still on. I woke up, or thought I woke up, around 3 in the morning. I couldn't move. It felt like someone had laid a heavy blanket over my entire body, pinning me to the mattress. I couldn't lift my arms, couldn't turn my head, couldn't even open my mouth to scream. The only things I could move were my eyes. And that's when I saw him. There was a man standing in the corner of my bedroom, the far corner, near the closet, about 10 feet from my bed. He was perfectly still, just standing there in the darkness. I couldn't make out any features. He was more of a silhouette, a shape that was darker than the surrounding shadows. But I could feel him watching me. I lay there paralyzed, my heart hammering, unable to move or scream or do anything but stare at this figure in my room. The TV was still on, providing just enough light that I could see him clearly. He wasn't moving, wasn't making any sound, just standing there, watching. This lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 or 3 minutes. Then, suddenly, I could move again. The paralysis released all at once, and I sat up gasping, reaching for the lamp on my nightstand. The corner was empty. No one was there. I turned on every light in my apartment and checked every room, every closet, even under the bed. Nothing. The door was still locked from the inside. The windows were latched. No one could have gotten in or out. I convinced myself it was a dream. Sleep paralysis is a real thing. I'd read about it before. Your brain wakes up before your body does, and sometimes you hallucinate. It's terrifying, but harmless. Just a glitch in the sleep cycle. I went back to bed eventually, leaving the lights on, and didn't sleep well the rest of the night. But that was just the first time. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same thing. Woke up paralyzed around 3 a.m., couldn't move, and there he was. The man in the corner, still just a dark silhouette, still perfectly motionless, still watching. This time, though, I noticed something. He was closer. Not by much, maybe a foot or 2, but definitely closer to my bed than he'd been the first time. When the paralysis broke, I turned on the lights. Empty corner. No explanation. I made an appointment with my doctor the next day. She listened to my description and nodded sympathetically. Sleep paralysis, she said. It's more common than you'd think. Stress, irregular sleep schedules, sleeping on your back. All of these can trigger episodes. The hallucinations are a well-documented part of the experience. Your brain is in a state between sleeping and waking, and it can conjure very vivid images. But it feels so real, I said. I can see him clearly. And he's in the exact same spot both times. It's pulling from your memory to construct the experience. But I promise you, there's no one actually there. She prescribed some sleeping pills and suggested I see a therapist to address any underlying anxiety. I left feeling reassured. It was just my brain playing tricks on me, nothing to be afraid of. Except it kept happening. Every 2 or 3 nights, I'd wake up paralyzed and he'd be there. The man in the corner. And each time, he was a little bit closer. After 2 weeks, he'd moved from the far corner to the middle of the room. After a month, he was standing at the foot of my bed. I still couldn't make out any features. His face was always in shadow, his form always indistinct. But I could sense his presence more intensely with each episode, could feel the weight of his attention on me. The sleeping pills didn't help. The therapy didn't help. I tried everything. Changing my sleep position, sleep hygiene routines, meditation apps, white noise machines. Nothing stopped the episodes. And he kept getting closer. By March, he was standing beside my bed, so close I could have reached out and touched him if I'd been able to move. I'd lie there paralyzed, staring up at this dark figure looming over me, feeling his presence like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. The episodes were lasting longer too. What started as 2 or 3 minutes had stretched to 5, then 10, then 15 minutes of complete paralysis while this thing stood over me. I say thing, because by this point I'd stopped thinking of it as a man. There was something wrong about the proportions. The way it stood was too still, too perfect. Humans move, even when they're trying to be motionless. We breathe, we shift our weight, we blink. This thing did none of that. It was like a statue, a silhouette carved from darkness itself. I went back to my doctor. She referred me to a sleep specialist who had me do an overnight sleep study. They hooked me up to a dozen monitors and watched me sleep in their lab. Nothing. The study showed normal sleep patterns, no apnea, no unusual brain activity, no explanation for the paralysis episodes. The specialist said some people are just prone to sleep paralysis, and there's not always a clear medical cause. But what about the hallucinations? I asked. What about the figure I see? Shadow figures are one of the most common sleep paralysis hallucinations, he explained. Across cultures, people report seeing dark figures, often male, standing in their rooms during episodes. Some cultures call them demons or ghosts. But neurologically, it's just your brain's threat detection system firing during a vulnerable state. Your amygdala is activated, creating a sense of presence and danger. It's getting closer, I said. Each time, it's closer to my bed. He frowned at that. The consistency of the hallucination is unusual, but not unheard of. Your brain might be reinforcing the pattern. I'd recommend cognitive behavioral therapy specifically for sleep disorders, and perhaps a different medication. He prescribed something stronger. I started the therapy. I did everything right, but nothing changed. In April, something shifted. The figure was no longer just standing beside my bed. Now, during episodes, it would lean down. Slowly, over the course of the paralysis, it would bend at the waist until its face, or where its face should be, was level with mine. I couldn't see any features. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Just darkness. But I could feel its breath. Cold air washing over my face, smelling of nothing and everything, like the air in a sealed room that hasn't been opened in years. And I started hearing things. Not words exactly. More like a sound that might have been words in a language I didn't understand. Or maybe it was just the sound of air moving through a throat that wasn't shaped quite right. But it came from where the mouth should be, and it was clearly directed at me. The therapist suggested I was layering new fears onto the existing hallucination, that my anxiety about the episodes was making them worse, adding new elements. She said I needed to stop fighting the paralysis, to accept it as harmless and let it pass without fear. I tried. God, I tried. But when you're lying there, unable to move, while something that shouldn't exist leans over you and makes sounds that might be words, acceptance is pretty fucking difficult. In May, it touched me. I woke to the familiar paralysis, the familiar figure leaning over me. But this time, I felt something. A cold pressure on my forehead. Like fingers, long, too long fingers, pressing against my skin. The touch was wrong. It wasn't the temperature exactly, though it was ice cold. It was the sensation itself. Like being touched through water or through a membrane. like the thing touching me existed slightly out of phase with normal reality. The touch lasted for the entire episode, and when the paralysis finally broke and I could move again, there were marks on my forehead. 4 small bruises in a line, like fingerprints, that stayed visible for 3 days. I took pictures of them and showed my doctor. She said they could have been from me pressing my own hand against my forehead during sleep, or from sleeping on something that left an impression. She didn't say I was lying, but I could see the skepticism in her eyes. No one believed me. And why would they? Sleep paralysis is well documented. Shadow figure hallucinations are common. The human brain is capable of creating incredibly vivid false experiences. But the bruises were real. The marks on my skin were real. I started sleeping with my lights on. All of them. Every lamp in my studio blazing through the night. It didn't matter. The figure still came. Even in the bright light, I could see it. A shape of deeper darkness, a void in the shape of a man standing in my brightly lit room. In June, my friend Rachel stayed over. I'd told her about the episodes, and she'd offered to keep me company, to be there if I had another one. We set up an air mattress for her on the floor next to my bed. The episode came at 3:17 a.m. I woke to the paralysis, and there it was, leaning over me as usual. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything to alert Rachel sleeping just a few feet away. But then, and this is what terrifies me most, the figure turned its head. Slowly, deliberately, it looked away from me and down at Rachel, and it reached out one of those 2 long arms toward her. I've never fought so hard against paralysis. I poured every ounce of will I had into moving, into screaming, into doing something to protect my friend. And somehow, impossibly, I managed to make a sound. Just a small groan, barely audible. But it was enough. The figure froze, its hand suspended over Rachel's sleeping form. Then it straightened up, looked back at me, and made that sound again. That, not quite words, sound that raises every hair on your body. The paralysis broke. I sat up gasping, and the figure was gone. Rachel woke up, startled by my movement. "Did you have another episode?" she asked. "It was here," I managed to say. "It was reaching for you." She looked around the empty room, concern clear on her face. "Jen, there's no one here. It's just the sleep paralysis." I didn't tell her what I was really thinking, that it had been about to touch her, to mark her the way it had marked me. And I'd stopped it. Rachel didn't stay over again after that. I think she's worried about me. I think all my friends are. They've stopped suggesting solutions and started suggesting psychiatrists who specialize in psychotic disorders. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am losing my mind. But how do I explain what happened in July? I'd started recording myself sleeping. I set up my phone on a tripod pointed at my bed, hoping to capture evidence of the episodes, maybe proof that I wasn't making this up. The recordings were useless at first. Just hours of me sleeping normally, then suddenly sitting up and looking around, clearly in distress. Nothing visible in the frame except me. But the audio was different. On the nights I had episodes, there was sound. Not loud, and you had to turn the volume way up to hear it, but it was there. That same not quite word sound I'd been hearing, coming from somewhere in the room, continuing even after the paralysis broke, and I sat up. I took the recording to an audio engineer I knew from work, asked her to analyze it, see if she could figure out what it was. She worked on it for a week, running it through various filters and analysis software. When she called me back, she sounded disturbed. "Jen, where did you record this?" "In my apartment." "Why?" "The sound. It's not coming from any single point. It's like it's coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. And there's something else weird. The frequency patterns don't quite match anything in normal speech. It's like someone's speaking, but the resonances are wrong. Like the throat producing the sound isn't shaped like a human throat." She sent me the files. I listened to them over and over, and she was right. The sound was wrong in ways I couldn't quite articulate, but could definitely feel. It made my skin crawl. That's when I decided to move. I gave notice on my apartment, found a new place in a completely different neighborhood, and planned my escape from whatever was haunting me. My last night in that apartment was August 15th. I didn't sleep. I sat up all night with every light on, waiting for dawn when the movers would arrive. Around 3 a.m.,